Good evening. It's now 7 p.m. I'd like to start the meeting of the Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 7th of March 2023. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being recorded. Item 1, apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Churchman, if everyone else is present. Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the Housing Overview and Scrutiny meeting held on the 10th of January 2023 be approved as a correct record. Does any member have any comments on the minutes? Minutes are approved. Item 3, urgent items of business. I have not agreed to any items of urgent business. Does anyone wish? We do have a briefing note that's come forward. That is on item 9, so I shall leave that as item 9. Item 4, declaration of interest. Does anyone wish to declare an interest in tonight?
Chair, I need to say, I know it's black shots, but still need to say something that I actually live in the area as well, so, and the flats are, what they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Redser. So I'm going to order vary the order of the meeting tonight because we're joined by Councillor Spillman. So we're going to have the Cabinet Member report for housing. So thank you for joining us tonight, and over to you, Councillor Spillman, for your report.
I won't speak for too long. I'd like to take as many questions as possible, obviously. I'm really pleased that these reports have changed to this venue. I think it's much more appropriate. You've got, members have got access to officers as well, so there's a greater wealth of knowledge in the room covering all the areas of housing. So I think it's a much better way of doing things. This is my second report. It's a shame that I was first last time and then last this time, because it's like 2 years. When I did my first report, I hadn't done anything. So this is like a report on 2 years. So it's just the way the cookie crumbles, I suppose. So I'm very happy, although this is a report for last year, I'm very happy for it to become a report for the whole 2 years. I think it'd be silly otherwise. But don't ask me anything that happened a week after I took the role, because that's far too long ago. My approach to housing, and it was the same in opposition really, it's been very consistent, was that we needed to depart from more bureaucratic systems. We needed to get away from an approach where it was just about statutory duty, the bare minimum, and we needed to have a more human service. And I hope that has been reflected in a lot of the different changes and priorities that I've set. But it's not just me. I think it's come about because we do have a cohort of officers that are also of that same mindset. And I must just pay tribute to the officers. One thing, we've not had much turnover in our officer base, and that's because the team are happy, they're working well, they've got the resource that they need, and it's been an absolute pleasure working with them. A lot of the things that we're going to go through here, a cabinet member sets priorities, but the achievements in this report are essentially the achievements of the officers, and a lot of hard work at every level, down from director to the apprentices. So that needs to be taken into account. I think that we should be very thankful for, especially at the moment, given the environment, we should be very thankful for the officers that we've got at Thurrock Council, because most of them do an absolutely fabulous job. One of the first priorities I set was regarding homelessness. I've spoken a lot about this. I think they've done a fabulous job. I think the homelessness service is, apart from, I won't say the best in the country because I work for another one, so I have to be slightly tactful, but barring the one I work for, I think the homelessness service in this council is absolutely first class, and we've achieved results. I know there are a few eyebrows raised when I put forward some of the proposals and how bullish I was. Well, we've achieved nearly everything we set out to do, and we've saved this council, a small fortune. with our temporary accommodation whilst delivering better outcomes for the residents who come through the service. It's something we should be very proud of. And regarding the street homelessness, again, something, I mean, to have that goal, and it's almost set in stone in Thurrock now, everyone in, I hope, is forever now. You know, it's going to take a brave administration to roll back from that commitment. And I do hope that continues. In terms of one of the frustrations, we'll go to we've gone to the thing that I'm most proud of. We'll go to the thing that has been most frustrating, and that is housing development, which is really tricky at the moment. I took over really excited because the financial environment was really good, and unfortunately that financial environment, it wasn't perfect because there was still quite a lot of inflation, and there was a lot of issues with materials, but it was much better than it had been. It's much better than probably Councillor Worrell enjoyed at the end of her period, much better than Councillor Gledhill, much better than Councillor Johnson. So it had been on pause, housing development, just because of the finances. But that has become trickier. CO1 is a frustration, because I disagree with Councillor Worrell. We can disagree on that, it's not a problem. I think we had a decent plan, but when those borrowing rates go up and it puts £11 million on a project, it's a real frustration. I also had some, which frightened some officers actually, we had some good conversations about some very ambitious redevelopment on a much larger scale in Tilbury and in Grays, and I mean on a huge scale. Those plans are now, unfortunately, just because of the financial situation, interest rates, no longer viable. But that's not to say that the development, I mean, I won't talk about Blackshots endlessly because we've got that on the agenda, obviously. But I mean, that is probably the most exciting bit of regeneration that this council's seen for a very long time. And so I hope that you take the paper and you know, make comment, and if there's any issues, that we'll take that on board. And I think that's been the ethos, really, of the Housing Department and myself when working with committee. I hope that you've seen that across the board, that we have taken comment from committee. It's not been a battle between committee and portfolio holder during these 2 years. I've not been putting out lots of press releases, you know, very political press releases slamming the opposition, and I don't think too many have come my way as well. So I think that's testament to the fact that we have actually worked together on a lot of the housing issues. So I'm very pleased to have been for that situation to have occurred. I think it's how you set the tone. There's some big changes next year that should keep us awake and that we need to sort out. The massive housing regulation changes, massive, and we need to respond to them as soon as possible. I mean, the dust, the damp and mould, and all the other regulation issues that can come through regarding safety checks. And there's lots of papers going through Parliament that are going to set new tasks for us to complete. We need to make sure we're on top of that. The league tables as well are going to get published, which is going to be, I mean, if I'm being honest, I'm worried about league tables, not because of the scores, but I'm worried that we might end up in a situation, both sides, you know, whoever's in charge of Thurrock Council, where we start chasing league tables rather than chasing better outcomes for our residents. So that's a concern that I have regarding that issue. Damp and mould, I think we're forward compared to other councils because we did a deep dive much earlier before a lot of our other councils did. We were a lot more proactive. A lot of the cases because of how proactive committee were with it as well, and we've done a lot of work that other councils haven't. Now, I know that there are properties out there in our stock that we don't know about, that we've not seen, that are probably really bad. But that's the task, to make sure that we find these properties and act on them as soon as possible. I know that we're doing our best to, I mean, in terms of looking for damp and mould, we've never been this proactive. And in terms of repairs, as we'll go on to, repairs are performing adequately, I mean, above adequately. If you look at the stats for repairs, they're considering the times that we live in, which is, you know, with all the inflation pressures, the material problems, the staffing issues that the building sector is facing across the board, I think that our contract is performing with let's say with Mears is performing well. I mean, I was worried about, that was one of my main concerns when I came into the role, what I would find in the repairs contract. And, you know, it's not perfect, there are room for improvement, but it's a really collegiate operation. And I think we get a better deal from Mears than other councils potentially, because of how close we are and that how close that relationship is. So I'm pleased in that respect. I'd like to, one of the things I'm excited about, and I know it's just a buzzword, but there's a section in here.
Councillor Spearman, I'm just cautious about time because I know we've got 20 minutes for this item, and I do want to include as many questions as possible, but I'll let you go. Well, another sort of few minutes. But
yeah, it's fine. Yeah. I'm nearly done anyway. Transformation, localities and human learning systems. It sounds like properly unwieldy as a term, but what it means is joined up working, and it means making our it's about having our, say, estates officers and frontline officers working closely with colleagues in health, working closer with colleagues in social care, and making each visit count more than it has done in the past. So that work's really important, and we're actually, it's not just a buzzword in Thurrock, and we're seeing that in places like the Coroner and IMC, where we've got all those services working together. If you want to talk about that, I know that Ryan, I mean, we spoke about, Ryan's got some really good feedback about how that's working and how that's going to be progressing, so I'd encourage you to do that. In terms of the budget, the budget is tough. You know, when you can't raise your rent to the level of inflation, that has a consequence, and savings have to be made. But I'm really pleased with how engaged I've been at, you know, even throughout the budget process with officers, and I think we've found a balance to make those savings without too much damage to services. So I'm quite pleased about that. I mean, that's basic. I mean, I think any cabinet member, it's not my housing department. You know, I'm just a custodian that sets priorities. And I think any cabinet member's duty really is to hand over their portfolio to the next incumbent in at least as good, if not a better state than when they got it. Now, I think that the housing department is in a good place at the moment, considering the environment that we are in at the moment. And, you know, I may not be cabinet member after May. It's at the whim of the electorate and at the whim of the leader of the council. But I will say that I've really enjoyed it. It's been a really good experience, and I've really appreciated the interaction and feedback that I've had from ONS as well, because it has been constructive. This is one of the better committees in the council. It's been a long time since this got silly, this committee, and we do see that in other committees, and credit to you all, because you all care about housing as much as I do, and we've all worked on the same page to try and get things going forward. With that, I'll obviously end, but please, any questions?
Thank you. I think that went on, and I appreciate you had a lot to say to your report. I'm just want members to have as many questions as possible, so I'd like to make sure that even though we've got It says 20 minutes, but I think it's 30 minutes. I'd like to keep going for at least a few minutes longer.
I mean, I'm happy to answer as many questions to the Chair's discretion.
Thank you. I mean, the only question that well, not the only question, the first question I've got to kick off with is, I mean, damp and mould, we've spoken about it, there's a lot of noise about it, and rightly so. I am very, very concerned about that as a long-term project, especially with the Council's current financial situation. I know the HRA is different, but you know, we just need to make sure that people aren't living in that scenario. And one thing that I'd like to know, and I know it might be a slightly awkward question, but in terms of, and we won't be able to talk about singular or individuals, but as a council, have we had claims against us for damp and mould from residents who aren't getting the service of which we deliver? Because I haven't seen anything that refers to that, and I think that is. Do we have a number at all for that we can have? Because it just worries me that although we say it, and I know the government has said that we're under the spotlight for it, but we need to really ramp up even further, the fastest we could ever be to deal with this, because people's can't be living in this mess. So
I mean, I remember saying when I was when we had our in opposition, when you're the chair, obviously you have meetings with the director, and I remember saying on several occasions, probably about 3 or 4 years ago, that I saw damp and mould as the next sort of solicitor ambulance chasing big trend, because from my view, back then, no one should be under any illusion. Yeah, damp and mould makes people ill. Yeah? And the scandal is that it took that little kiddie dying for that to be accepted without caveat. That's the scandal. So, I mean, I absolutely embrace the report that comes forward. I think it's a good thing. And it's something that we won't shy away from, but it brings big challenges. And I mean, I know that there has been, I don't know the exact number of claims made against the council, but I know there have been claims made against the council, and there will be claims made against the council, and they will be dealt with by legal on their merits, and if they go to court, they will be dealt with in court on their merits. My main concern, I can't control someone doing a no-win, no-fee claim. But what I can control is making sure that we've got a department that acts immediately and suitably when we find damp and mould in some of our properties. But one of the dangers, and I think this is the danger, and it's really tricky, is that we know that there are 3 different main types of damp and mould. So you've got condensate, you've got damp and mould coming in, water ingress, coming in through a structural problem, and then you've got rising damp. So they're the 3 main causes of damp and mould. Now, rising damp and water ingress are clear structural problems with a building, and it's something we can go in, diagnose, fix. Condensate is more complicated because it takes partnership working between resident and council for both sides to find solutions. And that comes with, how do you get condensate out of the building quicker? And that is where the council side comes in terms of better ventilation, fans, dehumidifier systems, all that sort of thing. But there's also, how does the tenant reduce creation and of condensate or condensate getting stored, kept within a house? And that takes education. Now, for too long, if it was condensate, and we've all been there, and we all saw this a few years ago, you would see damp and mould, and you would report it, and they'd go, tenant's fault. They'd go over and paint it, and go, tenant's fault. Well, the Ombudsman has now stamped on that, and we now, it's now unacceptable to behave in that way, and rightly so as well. But it's about having, it's about educating tenants, to help damp and mould returning in their properties. I mean, I visit lots of tenants in properties with damp and mould. I do repairs for a TA service. And the example I give when tenants have, when I'm trying to encourage tenants to ventilate more when they have a shower or just to put a lid on a cooking pot, just after we've done our repairs so that to stop it returning is, when you have a shower today, don't open any windows.
Really sorry, Councillor Spillman. I appreciate it. I think we do get that, and I don't want to cut you up. I really don't. It's just, I think we could spend a long time, and that's really important.
If I could just quickly finish that point.
Yeah, I'll let you finish that just one point. Because
I say to, don't open any windows when you have a shower, and then go back in 4 hours and see how much water is still sitting there. The next day, have a shower and open the windows, and you'll realise that water's disappeared in 5 minutes. So it's just about, educating tenants on how they can deal with these problems, but without not doing it in a patronising way and it being a partnership. And I think that's the challenge that the industry's got, is finding that balance. Apologies.
No, thank you. I think I don't know whether officers can let us know that afterwards, because I don't know about the committee, but I'd like to know. Not necessarily claims, because as you say, anyone can make a claim as whether it's valid or not, and I'd be more concerned about upheld complaints and ones that we actually have come out that we've done something wrong. And I think it's good that we have obviously pushed forward on this. I think my experience has been a lot of what you said about the resident side of things, and I think there is a balance, like you said, about what we can do individually, but I do think that's outside of some resident scope when it isn't their fault and they seem to be battling. So I would really like to get that, if I can, if the officers could send us how many claims have been made that have been successful, not necessarily claims against us in total. So I'll go over to Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions, so if be quick, you can answer everybody else's. So I did try to get to this in full council a couple of months ago. So we've got people sitting on the housing waiting list, particularly families that are trapped in flats. I've got a family where you've got a young family. The daughter's just about to go to secondary school. She's still sharing a bedroom with her two siblings, 2 and 3 years old. We've got families where they've got, one at about 10 and then she's had twins, and so she's got 2 babies with, a child that is already in secondary school, and it's simply not good enough, and we've stopped building, So what is your answer? What is your message? What can you say to those people? We're just about to stop moving people. If we move forward with Blackshots, then people are going to start to take priority. Well, they will take priority, and that's going to take 2 years. So what do you say to families that are stuck in flats and they can't go anywhere? That girl's going to secondary school with 2 children sleeping in her bedroom. She can't do her homework. She hasn't got no space. What are you going to do to try? We've always had a turnover of housing, I guess. What's the answer to that? What's your plan?
So, I'm not going to lie. My initial plans have been scaled back significantly just because of the borrowing costs. That is the only reason. When borrowing costs go up that much, a whole range of projects are no longer on the table. But we do still have a pipeline. Each one of those is going to be obviously looked at again to see if they're still viable. One thing I will say, though, is that we do actually have more council homes today than when I took on this portfolio holder role, which is probably one of the first times for many years that that's occurred. But not only that, it's because we purchased so many. Because part of the reason for purchasing was that it was a balance in case the building environment got difficult. And if we hadn't purchased those properties, decanting from Blackshots, for instance, would have been very difficult. That decision doesn't just affect homelessness. A lot of those properties have gone to, quite a few of them have gone to children in care as well. So we've been helping social services. We've been cutting down the general fund budget. But in terms of what do I say to, and I fully empathise, you know, would I want to live in some of the properties? No, not ideally. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to pretend that there are some properties that I personally would be absolutely content and wouldn't want to move for if I was overcrowded like they are. Of course I'd want to move. But the environment to build is very difficult. And it's something we need to have. Well, first of all, we need to look at the pipeline and see what's viable and what's not. And then we need to probably engage with some private sector partnerships, better than we have done in the past, to see where we can get building going. But no, it is the. I mean, I'm not. I mean, I said right at the start, it's the one area that has been a great frustration to me, because I believe in council homes. Yeah? Nobody. There are people that, you know, and I think everyone does in this room. You know, there are some councillors who are. You're probably in other. I mean, we're quite a pro-council house council, to be honest. But in other boroughs, there are probably people who are councils that are not so keen on building council homes. But I'm very pro building council homes. But the problem is that I can't put forward schemes that are £5, £6, £7 million in the red, because they're non-starters, and it's of great frustration to me. And to be honest, it's the one area that has irritated me the most.
Can I come back to you on that? So obviously, like, there is no answer for them people in them flats, is there? So, you know.
Well, there is, because we have got a pipeline.
But they're all, every week you see it everywhere. Nothing to bid on, nothing to bid on, nothing to bid on. You know,
it's very difficult.
There's not the turning over, you know.
It's very difficult. Yeah.
And I just don't know what to say to these families, and I just think that we do need to prioritise that in the same way as we prioritise the homelessness. You know, maybe change your focus if it's you again and say, I've got to start moving those families out of those high-rise, because it's just not fair for them. But that's a problem in itself. But the second place I really wanted to go was capital projects are just not going to, you know, we've been told, we've read it in several papers now, that we're just not going to be able to take forward anything that relies on a bit of borrowing, you know. So
that's not the case in the HRA, though.
I was just going to say, no. That's where I was going. Go on.
I mean, we've had really constructive conversations with commissioners, and I mean, they're going to do a deep dive into the HRA just as a matter of procedure, but initial soundings from commissioners have been really positive regarding the finances of the council. So, I mean, as you know from your time, whenever you do a big project, I mean, if you're just doing day-to-day, it comes out of, you know, your income and your expenditure. But when you do a big project, you roll a big project out, you borrow to get it done. And that will still continue. We're not in the same situation as the general fund. I mean, in terms of our general fund spend, we've taken huge chunks out of it as well. Our general fund spend is particularly low. I mean, we benchmark so well compared to other councils on our general fund spend. I mean, it's like equivalent councils probably spend 3 times, 4 times more on homelessness than we do because of the decisions we've made. But in terms of borrowing, I mean, if you look at Blackshots, for instance, you wouldn't be getting this paper tonight if commissioners hadn't said that the HRA is financially sound and that we can borrow money to make it happen. Like, that report has been given the go-ahead to go forward to Cabinet by commissioners, and that's really good, and it's credit to the officers.
They haven't said we can build, though, have they? They've just said we can decant and pull them down, haven't they? They haven't said, like, you can just borrow to do the project, have they? They've said that this will be a business case.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so business case and next cabinet decision on that. But at the moment, it's a permission to develop that.
We'll move to Councillor Lydiard first.
Thanks, Chair. In your position as portfolio holder, do you do any physical checks on sort of repairs or, let's say, estates that have been cleaned? Because, as you know, as councillors, all we get is moans, and I see some fantastic statistics here, but I want to be sure that there is a chain of checks right the way through the organisation, random checks to make sure that what's been claimed and what's been paid for is actually done.
I mean, from a personal point of view, I get a lot of casework, obviously, because I'm portfolio holder. So I do, when that goes through, I will follow up and make sure that things are okay. But I'm also, as you know, a bit of a campaigning councillor as well. So I do knock on a lot of doors. And so not just in Ockenden, but around the borough. So when I do, when someone says they've had a repair, I do poke my nose in. And I also do quite a lot of visits to people's homes as well. So yes, I do. I'd like to do a lot more of it, but I'll pass you over to the team, because they'll tell you what the follow-up procedure is on a repair completed by our team.
So, I mean, on the one note, on one hand, we've got a really good report later on as to what we do in terms of estate management and all that. So part of it will be picked up there. In terms of repair checks, we go between 10 and 15% of repairs get checked for quality. And obviously there is a lot of, when repairs are more complex, so there is a follow-on, and very often there is a surveyor involved, either from us or from the contractor, to sort of specify and sort of check on the works as they are delivered.
So do you check 1% or any at all?
Myself, no, I don't actually. I don't check myself. What I have been undertaking is quite a lot of shadowing and visits with contractors and with officers. So I actually go out on the rounds, go out on estates, go out on visits, go out on tenancy audits. So I've been, over the sort of my time here, I've been to quite a few properties, quite a few estates. I've done some cleaning of estates as well with caretakers on sort of occasion. So yes, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Redsell.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to moan too much, because I think everybody's at a moan. There's probably a lot. There's a lot we could say. I'm not going to need too many gold stars out tonight. But I think, and I'm not going to labour on the damp and mould, because I think that will come up on the Black Shots one anyway. But caretaking and estate services, I don't think that's great out there. I can only go by the blocks I've got, where I wonder how many people go out and really check what the caretaker does, because he isn't doing his job. So if he's being paid for a job that he isn't doing, I want him checked out. The other thing is we've had lots of talks about travellers' sites. I wonder if anybody in this room has actually been out to the travellers' site in Black Shots. It is a state. Yeah. I have never seen a travellers' site look like that. I've been out with the chief exec 3 times in 3 years, and it still looks the same. And to be honest, if that's how we live, if we say on here management of 3 council-run travellers, that's not managing, because they are getting a site, you know, not for free, but they're probably getting benefits on where they are. But it is a real state. I don't know about the other 2. I've only been past them and can see that. But that nothing has ever been done to that. As Steve knows, that's a real disgusting place. Nobody'd want to go over there anyway. That was the 2 really. The percentage of repairs completed on target, I don't quite agree with that, and I can only go really by Black Shots, and I'll bring it up on the Black Shots one. But we've got people who have been told lately that damp and mould is down to them to do. Get on with it, and that's what they were told. So I find it's wrong. The pictures I've been sent are disgusting. I've got a child there who is ill, and a mother who is ill now, with it. It is so thick that, you know, but we are trying to alleviate that. But if we're leaving people in that state, then it's wrong, totally wrong, because I don't want another child to die somewhere, and I think we've got to do something about that. Thank you.
I'll pick up all three. In regarding caretaking, I mean, I've recently reported a building that I wasn't happy with in my own ward. So I think you're going to get variation between different areas sometimes, and that variation needs to be levelled out at a very good level. So if you ever have issues like that, obviously, like, contact the relevant officers. I mean, mine was responded to fairly quickly, but you would expect that, wouldn't you? If the portfolio holder for housing raises an issue, if that's not happening, then we've really got problems, haven't we? But also contact myself as well. So I'll chase that through as well. And if you ever want me to do any site visits with you, then you've got my personal number as well. You only need to get in touch, and we can arrange that. That's not a problem at all. Or email me. I'm more than happy to do that. I must admit, I have never been to a traveller site in Thurrock, so I would be more than interested to arrange that at some point. Yeah, I'd be more than interested to do that, because it's something that I need to know, and I would be more than happy to do that. Regarding damp and mould, as I've just said, if any, I mean, sometimes you know that there is a miscommunication between contractor and tenant, especially in a situation where it's quite an emotive issue like damp and mould. But if ever an officer of this council speaks to a tenant like that, then I want to know about it. And I know that Evelina will want to know about it as well. Because, as we said, those days are gone. Yeah? Those days are gone. And across the sector, you know, that is unacceptable. It was never acceptable, but you could get away with it. Those days are gone. And I'd like to know about it.
Just coming back on that, thanks, Chair. I do speak to Peter. He knows I speak to him a lot, you know, and I've emailed you, but this one I've only received in the last couple of days. So, and I will get to it, you know. But I just think what I don't want to happen is something to happen to a child.
No. And
now,
that's the one.
And that is, you know, we don't want that in this borough. What we've got now, we definitely don't need that. So,
and I would say that it's not just a worry in our stock; it's a worry in housing across the board, in the private sector as well, and in housing associations. And I mean, Evelina has led a task group across a whole range of organisations in Thurrock, which is one of the more forward plans that we've had on this issue. So it is a Thurrock-wide issue, yeah, and it will be soon, yeah. But I mean, it will be, you know, we should just because, I mean, if something like that was to happen in a private rented house, it's just as much a stain on this borough as if it was council stock, as far as I'm concerned. You know, we have a responsibility to look after private sector housing to make sure it's up to a certain quality as well. And I welcome those duties and powers being expanded.
thank you. My only worry is that we're going to give these people another winter in the same conditions, and it's going to be worse because we can't solve black shots. They have to come down. We can't solve it because we can't patch it up anymore. You know, it's gone past that sticking plaster and trying to do everything to patch them up, but it's gone past that. So I think if we're thinking of, I'd like things to move a bit faster, you know, because if we're asking these people to have another winter there, yes, we could have something really happen. So thanks, Luke, anyway.
Councillor Hebb.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Spillman, for your report. I'll just quickly start off by echoing some of your sentiments about where the department is. I have to say, in my 12 years, I think housing has been on a trajectory positively. But in the 12 years that I've been here, and I can look left to right, quite literally left to right, in terms of prior portfolio holders through to where we are now, through to officers from where we were to where we are now. And I genuinely think there is an attitude adjustment which is very notable in the housing department. And yet, while we might give some hard questions, we know that you care immensely, and know that, and I know you know that we do as well. Just going back to this whole damp mould piece, I raised this in November, and to be honest with you, nothing I've heard tonight sort of made me think anything different in the context of there is an issue, which does still happen, however we like to think it does or doesn't. There is an issue where someone is making a decision whether someone's perception is right or wrong. Now, someone's perception isn't right or wrong, it's their perception. But the problem is we have a Thurrock organisational individual or department that will make a decision and say, no, that is not a council issue or a structural issue, it's a resident issue, or it's not a resident issue, it's a structural issue. And I keep coming back to this point around independence. So in the health service, there is the scheme, the PALS, the Patient Advisory Liaison Service. I brought this up in November. There is a reason why whenever anyone asks me or, a bit of casework comes in about something medical, I don't look at the council typically. I signpost to PALS or Health Watch Thurrock, typically because they're independent, can be trusted to be objective and give an objective assessment and sort of say it as it is. I just wondered, has there been any evolution of thinking since we met before? Because I genuinely think, and I don't know what the committee think, to get to that mindset evolution and that to latch over to that new world that we were just talking about, you won't do it, I don't think, in the current setup. Not because the people are making the wrong decisions necessarily, not because they're doing it for the wrong motivations, but because there's an independency that's missing from that process. And only then can we authentically go, someone independent has looked at this, not a member of the council, don't live with the resident,
Brilliant.
someone independent, almost like an arbitrator, perhaps the wrong word, but anyway, that's my first question. Comment. Of course you can. I'm not the chair, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there's a situation where there are certain behaviours that are so obviously going to cause. So let's take something extreme. So say you've got a box room, and you're hanging all your washing in lines in your box room, no windows open, but with a heater on, yeah, and you're doing that consistently. Now, it doesn't matter how good the structure of the building is, you're going to get damp and mould, and it's going to look so bad that it almost looks as though it must be structural, but it's not. It's just water evaporating, going up, having nowhere to go, and then mould growing on it. Now, if this is the tough one and this is where your sort of idea could have legs, because this is the tough one for the council. If that behaviour continues, what does the council do? And that is the tough one for officers. I mean, I don't want it to get to the point where it's almost like a ASB issue, that behaviour is continuing and continuing and continuing and continuing. But eventually, it's almost destruction of your own property, and it has to go to that level. But that's where that's why I think the arbiter is probably a good idea. And I think there are legs of that, because it is really difficult now in the current environment where, like I say, and that's an extreme out there case that you're only going to get one probably in our whole stock, that might be the case. But how do council deal with those sort of scenarios with the new legislation, which we don't actually know exactly what it's going to be at the moment? But it's that, there's only so much guidance and information and support. So I don't think it's a battle in 99.9% of cases. It's not about deciding, is it this or is it that? It's about us doing our bit, but also providing support in terms of financial support, because the one thing I didn't mention was heating. One of the main reasons for damp and mould is that people can't afford to put the heating on, because they're turning radiators off in a certain room because the cost of living means they can't afford to heat that room. And then, of course, those cold walls are just a magnet for water vapour to settle on. And they're shutting those rooms away. They're not even going in them because they're too cold. Not open the windows, perhaps storing lots of stuff in them. So ventilation's even worse because they're not using that room. So there is a lot of extra support we can give in terms of finances, which is in place. But yeah, I agree. I think that is something that I've not considered, and it's something that I'd be willing to consider. I don't know if officers want to comment.
I was going to say that actually, Councillor Hub, when you first mentioned it, it is on the task and finish group that Councillor Spillman mentioned about that we would like to develop such an idea. So it's definitely sort of an item that we're working on because we think it will be for the benefit of the residents and of the sort of wider protection of the council as well, because there will be that independence absolutely to go there and verify, have those conversations. So it's definitely on our list of things that we are working through to deliver.
Chair. Very good.
Just on that, if that had been around, I think perhaps we wouldn't have had black shots 15, 20 years in the making, because we would have moved forward with it, because it stays within the council and gives them a lot more problems. If there had been a separate entity there, we might have dealt with this a bit quicker. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, by the sound, what I think we're all alluding to and thinking is it's an element of trust. And as much as we're saying new corner, we're doing more. If a resident's been consistently told, oh, it's you, and then it turns out it isn't, how do they trust us? And actually having someone else come along, and they may not be in our favour because of the fact that we may think that that's the issue, but actually it is structural. But at least that's that independent viewpoint, and we're not us making that final decision. Just a final question from Councillor Wall. Oh, sorry, did you want to? Oh, sorry, I thought you said you've got more. Back to Councillor Hebb.
Here's a quick one.
Oh,
So probably taking you back to when, like, you was in opposition and sat aside me, you know, and we had a different leader of the housing. HMO, unlicensed HMOs, you know, I think that it was your idea that we should be targeting the amount and making sure that the percentages come down. And we've had a report come this year, I think it was about 600. They expect that we've got about 600 HMOs still unlicensed. You know, and again, something that, you know, we need to, but again, I'd like it to be a priority, because we've got to change what our priorities are, in that we've got to be on top of that, because it's money we're losing. And we need all the money we can get, actually.
So luckily we have the king of HMO licensing
I know.
with us, with Delau, so I don't know if you want to chip in there, Delau.
So, due to time, we have a briefing note on this that we will be bringing forward, so I didn't want to get into that too much. Just going to go back to Councillor Hebb.
Thank you. Just a quick couple of ones is, we are, I think, going to mention this later on Peter's report regarding the caretaking services and the grounds maintenance piece. There was a bit that just really struck out at me, and there's a bit yes, Minister, about basically officers administration and everything like that as being a bottleneck in the process to actually service delivery. And I think it's great that there's that frank, this is where we're at the minute. We're doing lots of reports, haven't got the autonomy to effectively sort of commission tasks within small budget stuff. So I think it's a great, you know, bit of this is where we're at, but this is what we might want to do. So, and then I got thinking about, and I'm a bit gutted that Carol's not here. I was going to bring her in.
She's not very well.
Oh dear, I hope she's okay. The one thing that social care has done, and I think this is probably perhaps more towards Evelina and the team rather than the portfolio, but something you might want to look at, Councillor Spillman, is the concept of local area coordination. And the one benefit and beauty of that is while they're not necessarily commissioners of sort of services, they are very good at quickly, rapidly getting the right support on the phone, on the door, however you want to look at it. And I just wondered whether there's an opportunity to sort of find a sort of local area coordinator hybrid-esque sort of approach, but working in tandem with the tenants panels and the residents panels. You can make a committee and an industry out of this, so we might not want to go, you know, so far, but there just feels like there is a model. You know, local area coordinator is not a Thurrock invention. I believe it originally come from Australia, didn't it?
Yeah.
So we've been around too long, we remember
Yeah,
that, don't we?
definitely.
It come from Australia. So, but we've tried it. We've had it now for a good 10 years. I just wondered if there was any thoughts on that. And just one last one, just picking up on a point that Councillor Worrell raised quite rightly around housing stock being available for people as life circumstances change. Of course, life circumstances aren't just constrained to the nuclear family and the size of the unit, but also financial circumstances. So there are, let's be honest, under the existing regime of sort of lifelong tenancy arrangements, people who, go on, get promotions or jobs and stuff like that. And, I know tenants with salaries that far outweigh probably what I think should be, living in the council. That's just my opinion. But then there is a thing for me, and I just want to unpick the piece around the strategy that's noted within. There is possibly also an element that might be missing from the strategy, in that when someone can, that they could move out of that into the private home ownership model, because then that unlocks. It's very touchy, and I thought I'd say it because not everyone would agree with it, but at some point, if there are people that are able to leave the system and go into, the home ownership model, then people like I think they were your constituents, Lynn, weren't they? Then there's that movement and that natural churn through the system. I champion Life's Ladder. It is a passion of mine that for everyone, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you've done, should be able to achieve. And that's different for everybody. But I just wondered if there's something perhaps slightly missing from the strategy. So
this was government policy for a little while, wasn't it? In terms of Mr. Osborne had this was one of his policies, but it didn't go through. Now, I'll be honest, personally, I'm against. I like our council estates, although they're not so much estates anymore because they're pepper potted now because there's so many people who've bought their own homes. But I like us to have mixed estates with different people of different, and the danger is you can end up with, for want of a better word, ghettoising areas just by having no wealth in that area. And then if you've got no wealth and loads of people that are struggling in one area, then the shop closes down, and then the cafe closes down, and the restaurant closes down, and the pub closes down. So that's why I like mixed estates, and it's not something that I am personally in favour of. But I do see, there's no doubt there's an argument. Why should somebody who earns £100,000 a year be paying £100 a week for their rent? I get that, but I just think that there's a value to having mixed estates and those people in those communities, not just economically, but also in terms of aspiration as well. It's a tricky one. It's a minefield. It's not something that I'm personally in favour with, but I understand that there's a debate to be had without people going at each other. There's a reasoned argument both ways. Personally, it's not something I'm in favour of.
So I'm only going to say that Peter will probably touch on it a little bit when we talk about the locality models, but that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we've spent a bit on this, and I do appreciate you said you could answer questions. I think it's. I think it's right to actually question our portfolio holders rather than having 20 minutes in the chamber. That often doesn't get enough questions on it, and I think what you do. I know I've been working with you for a long time. I know your passion. I know that you want to achieve a lot of things for the housing department, and I know you alone, as a portfolio holder, can only do so much with everything. But although we give you a hard time, I think there are good things that you and the department are doing. It's just them bad things we need to just we all know we've got to resolve them. But just a few minutes to sum up, if you can, please.
I'll sum up. I said this earlier, but I just kept talking. It's when you don't have notes, you just keep talking, don't you? I don't think you do give me a hard time. I think you make very constructive points on very important issues, and without that, what one person can't see every angle, and that's the point of having strong committees. So no, I think I'm really pleased that I can come to this committee without thinking, oh, there's an election around the corner, it's just going to be a load of electioneering. That's a really constructive thing. And it's been like that in housing for as long as I can remember. So that's a really constructive thing. It's not the same in every committee, even in this council. But no, I mean, who knows? I might not be portfolio holder in May. Who knows? As I say, it's at the whim of various different factors. But if I am, then the tone will stay the same, and we'll get together. I'm happy to meet you all individually to go through your priorities. I hope that we keep this committee intact as well, because I think it's a good committee. And lastly, I just want to thank the officers, because it's been an absolute pleasure working with these officers. And I know I've got this like massive working class chip on my shoulder that I'll die with it. Yeah? You know, there are some suits, you know, that are just, you know, of just all words and no action, you know, that you just think, do you really, why are you even here? Yeah, but these guys live and breathe housing, and it's an absolute pleasure. And there's so much talent as well in the department, and it's made my job like relatively easy because of the amount of talent we've retained, and I hope that we retain it for a long time, because if we do, then the housing department will be even better next year and even better the year after. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spillman, for that. And I don't think there's any, it's because it's a report, isn't it? There's no recommendations on that one. So with that, we'll now move on to, I'll vary the order to put black shots, because I think black shots is one that will take up, you know, a bit of time, and I want to give that as much as we can. Obviously, we need to focus on the report item 7, sorry. So we need to focus as much as we can on the report itself, because I know it's easy to bring a lot of things into this, but from my understanding, the report itself is purely the demolition and redevelopment, the proposal, not necessarily the definitive. So with that, can I bring in Julian to present the report? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good evening, members, once again. By way of introduction, and I'll be relatively brief because I think the report is pretty self-explanatory, but this report really takes you on from where you were in November and where Cabinet was in December, and it is in fact the next stage of the journey to the redevelopment of the estate. You remember that the previous report essentially agreed the proposals and the principle of redevelopment. What this report does is, first of all, it sets out a proposed site area for developing those proposals. It seeks approval to commence decanting residents from the properties and the payment of home loss and disturbance payments, the approval for negotiations with leaseholders for the repurchase of their properties, a decision not to re-let the properties, even to temporary accommodation, because of the decant and leaseholder purchase decisions, and the approval to serve a demolition notice under Section 138B and Schedule 5A of the 1985 Act, which suspends the obligation on completion of the right to buy on the blocks in question. It also sets aside the necessary budgets to meet those costs of purchase. The introduction is before you. The reasons for demolition of Blackshots tower blocks you yourselves have hinted at in your early discussions, and we discussed at some length last time, so I'm not going to dwell on those. But I would draw your attention first of all to the preferred option and the scope for redevelopment at 313. The various option layouts are in the appendix, and option 4 remains the best overall solution. The scheme is the least dense. It allows for no costly undercroft parking, helps with the potential for resident decanting, enabling one move. It is the best option to date financially, and it does help provide better natural surveillance. Now, I know before any of you rise to speak that this particular issue may cause some concern to you. It is important to remember that we will be trying to minimise the land take. We will certainly be trying to get the most efficient scheme in terms of land take that we can. Obviously, as I said at the end of your last consideration of this matter, there is a balance to be struck between height and land take, but at this point we have to start somewhere. We do need, as members have said already, to get on with this, and option 4 is the best and recommended solution. So the principle of demolition is established. We now embark on the decanting. From the date of decision, again, you've referred to this, residents will attract priority through the allocation scheme, and the decant policy will apply. It is estimated by your allocations colleagues that it will take up to 2 years, but obviously, dependent on the availability of alternative accommodation, to pick on Councillor Redsl's words, we'll move it as quickly as we possibly can and get it done as quickly as we possibly can. Qualifying tenants now get the home loss payments. As it says, that's currently set at 7,800 and gets amended each year. This obviously also commences the negotiations with the owners of the leasehold properties. And there is a reference in the decisions to the Council considering, should it become necessary, the use of compulsory purchase powers. Nobody is being asked today for a decision on that. That is a matter that follows when you have a scheme and you've exhausted all your potential negotiations with your residents, then that's a really important thing that must come first. But given the importance of getting these blocks down, it is important just to flag that the Council should consider that in due course. The demolition notices at 327 and following, they essentially, as I say, suspend the right to buy or the requirement to complete the right to buy, and that's an important thing because clearly you don't want to put a right to buy purchaser in the point where they are completing on something that you would then have to buy back. That would be distressing and frankly administratively unnecessary. The financial commitments are set out. There is an existing budget for the home loss and disturbance payments. The budget is set aside for the existing leasehold properties. As has already been said, the full business case for consideration will come back to you. This is, I described it as a journey. It's a stage by stage. The Cabinet established the principle following your consideration last time. Here we are now starting on clearing the blocks. That design and the procurement of the designers is underway, and you will need a business case. And clearly, at this point in time, yes, we don't have a full authority to actually do the works. We have the authority to get these blocks cleared, and I think everybody will agree that that's a really, really important thing to do. You'll see in the next steps that the procurement is ongoing, as I said, and there will be scheme design and further detailed consultation with the residents from April onwards, and then a Cabinet report with that business case back in December of this year. Happily take questions, Chair, as you'd expect. You're asked to comment on little 1 to 10, and as I say, this is due to go to Cabinet at its next meeting.
Brilliant. Do members have any comments or questions? I believe. Did you have your hand up, Councillor Wall, first? Or? Oh, Councillor Redsell.
I have got questions, but I think that Joy should be getting you.
I think I've done my bit, actually. As I said, we should be further than we are now. We're giving people another year or whatever still in those blocks, and I think we are going to have another fatality. And we've got to stop that. We've got to do everything to stop that, and I will speak to you after, Luke. But I think we've got to move forward. I'm not altogether happy with the plans, and I don't want to take Greenbelt to deliver this because I think there are options we haven't looked at. We've still got pieces of the land which even I know are there, and we should use. And I think we can do a good development. And I know I keep mentioning Chadwell, but you as officers have done such a great job with Chadwell, and it gets lots of comeback with it looking so good. We might as well say do 3 of those. in the area. It's the green belt I've really got the problem with. And the other thing is, if we're looking at putting up 6 or more high flats, no, I'll be against that. I'm not taking 11 down to put 6, 7, 8 up again, because we're going to have the same problems in whatever 20 or 30 years' time. I don't want that. You know, I want to give people a decent place. I don't mind 3 or 4, you know, with balconies. At least they can come out. We shouldn't be putting people in little blocks anymore. It shouldn't be what we should be doing. We should give people a chance to enjoy the fresh air. You know, to be locked in a box is not the way to go. So I know we've got a long way to go with this, and there'll be talks going on, consultations going on. So we've still got a long way to go. And I hope the consultations with everybody in those flats. I did speak to Evelina the other day, when my residents have been calling the call centre and been put through to housing, and housing know nothing about the blocks of flats coming down. Now, it's been in the national press, it's been in the ordinary local press, it's been everywhere at meetings. And if we're telling residents that we know nothing about it, that's wrong. I mean, and I don't want to go into too much, but on one call, the person said, "Who did you get this from?" And they said, "Councillor Redsall." And they said, "Well, she's lying." And if I could have found out the name of that person, there would have been something flying. But that shouldn't happen. That shouldn't happen. It is out there, you know, to know. So I don't really want to go in. Everybody knows my feelings. I just want to get them down, you know, and get moving with it. Thank you, Luke.
So, Chair, thank you. I'll just comment on the Greenbelt and the height and the other sites, and then I'll ask Evelina to comment on the Chadwell and the last issue that Councillor Ridsell refers to. I mean, first of all, thank you, Councillor Ridsell, for your support for getting them down. I think that's really helpful. I hear what you say on the Greenbelt, and that's why in my introductory remarks I said clearly the consultants will look to minimise that and do the most efficient scheme possible. But as ever, before you, Chair, I can't tell you that we don't need to look at that area, and it would be wrong of me to pretend that we don't. We have looked at a fairly exhaustive list of sites. Once again, you know, the point of the study from the consultants is to, if there's anything else, we can still look at it. More than happy to look at anything that is sensibly in the vicinity. Again, forgive me for repeating myself, and this is given, if we count last time as well, this is the third time I've said it, but you do have a balance, and the balance is between height and land take. And I hear what Councillor Redsall says about not going to 6 stories and above, but the lower you stay, the more land you take, and that's the reality. Don't know if Evelina wants to come in.
I think, yes, we're definitely at that conversation, and I said I'm absolutely happy to investigate if there was a name. I understand it's difficult to get a name, but there is definitely, and I've sort of raised it with my officers immediately after that meeting, that really that message needs to go out there that this is absolutely happening. You're absolutely right. There should be no reason for people not to know about it. We're very proud of it in housing. There's a lot of officer time that got spent on it. There's a lot of officer sort of also interaction with residents on the ground, so we really should absolutely know about it. So if anyone ever comes across there being somebody that doesn't know, please take the name and get them referred back to myself, and we will obviously, you know, spread the information as much as we can. So this shouldn't absolutely be happening, and apologies if it is happening.
Councillor Warren.
Thank you, and thank you for a really good report. You know, it's sort of really detailed, and I'm pleased that it's finally we're making some movement on this. And I just feel that I kind of feel like all the dice have been rolled, and it's just rolled wrong at the wrong time. You know, because we need to be building, because to decant out of these is going to cause us problems right across, you know, the lettings, which is what I raised earlier. But these families at the same time don't deserve to be stuck living in those high rises that are just not fit for purpose. So and I did ask if, like, this is had permission from the commissioners for build, you know, why can't we build some and move some out into new houses, you know, rather than, you know, empty everybody and stop everybody else from moving. But, you know, it could be 3-4 years. We don't know, because if houses don't come available, then, you know, then where does that leave us? You know, that's nothing's moving anywhere. Why these people? Because they get to, I think I'm right in saying that they get to choose where they go as well. They don't have to just, you know, they get priority from anything that turns up. So, so that's my first thing, is that I am really concerned that we're pulling something down, and it does say one of the options is we demolish and just leave the land, you know, so that's very worrying, because it could be, but it's in the paper that we could do that, which then we lose the revenue from the housing, from the rents, from the council tax, from everything. So there is this is littered with worry as well as good news, so it is important to cover that. And I just wondered if from the consultation, the leaseholders, was they happy they're coming down, or are they? I remember when we did one in Grays, there was a bit of a pushback, that the leaseholders didn't really want to accept the amount of money that the council was offering them, which is often, I believe, is often the case with these sort of schemes. So I just wondered, not many leaseholders, but enough for us to have to, you know, worry about, that they could be sitting in there and stopping the demolition.
People don't usually need a microphone to hear me. So, yeah, 3 or 4 points there. I mean, first of all, yeah, now just to be absolutely crystal clear, the approval from the commissioners thus far is for the funds to do the home loss and disturbance payments, the leaseholder negotiations, and obviously the development of the business case. You really have to have a scheme. You really have to procure a contractor in the market before you can actually start doing it. Certainly one of the things that we'll be asking both the advisors and indeed the contractor when that comes on board is exactly how it can be phased, and that's one of the reasons actually why we're starting with a perhaps bigger piece of land than members might ideally wish, because that gives you your best chance of doing a one-phase decant so that people can come straight out into the homes that they want. That will be, as I think I said last time, subject to the views of the contractor, but that's what it is. But yeah, at the moment it is obviously subject to that procurement. It is subject to a scheme that is financially viable, which is why the study is so important, to get something that can be designed and can work, and it will be subject to that business case. Certainly, I mean, I think the 2-year period is came from your allocation staff. I think it is as I understand it, a realistic view. I don't think it is unduly conservative, but neither do I understand it to be unduly aggressive. It is subject to what's available. Local colleagues will correct me if I'm wrong, but what typically happens in these cases is that it certainly isn't a one-off. You can't go, and usually a reasonable number of offers are made. You do have to draw a line eventually, but a sensible number of offers is made, and indeed people have choice, and that's partly what the consultation is about. So that's that. In terms of the leaseholders, I think the sample, of course, is small. I mean, I think that's one of the real importances of the consultation and the discussion. Sometimes you're quite right, Councillor Worrell, sometimes leaseholders aren't happy with what they're offered. I can't prejudge that. It'll be when you get out there and you can have the conversation with them.
Thank you. Councillor Lydiard.
Thanks, Chair. Just wondered if the tenants realise that if they go into the new properties, that they're likely to get a sort of 30-40% increase in rent, because the new properties will be affordable rents and they're probably paying social rents now. Will that upset a few?
So, I mean, I think there are two things to say to that. First of all is that although, of course, the models and the discussions we've had thus far have been based on that affordable rent, nobody has yet nobody within the council has as yet set a firm policy decision that is where you will be, and that, I guess, is still all to play for and all for discussion as to what you will ultimately be, and that will depend on the circumstances of the scheme and what you can afford to do and what you can't. So there is some policy discussion still to have on that. It is fair to say, of course, that people moving to entirely new properties within the council's housing stock will almost always face that. There will be an element of choice in this. I don't know if you wanted to add anything. Is that fair? No. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. What I was wondering was that the leaseholders, we know there's plenty of examples where leaseholders wait till the very last minute and have to go to court, and sometimes there's a whole block completely empty with one leaseholder sitting in there, all sorts of antisocial behaviour issues, rats and sewage problems and God knows what else. Are you anticipating all that sort of... And secondly, can you tell me whether leaseholders will be offered a leasehold property in another block as a swap?
So, as I understand it, your policy is that this is a straightforward buyout. They'll be offered a sum equivalent to the market value of their property, and they will take that and deal with it as they will. My understanding is that you're not offering an automatic return to somewhere else. In terms of your first question, Councillor Lilliard, I mean, your officers committed in your previous report that they would be keeping these properties watertight and wind and framed, and therefore the scenario that you paint, I would very much hope not. And certainly, I think the Cabinet member will be disappointed if that should come to fruition. In terms of will somebody be hanging on towards the end, I mean, that's what I just said to Councillor Worrell. I'm not going to prejudge that. I very much hope that won't be the case. I think it is the trick for that is in the negotiations that your colleagues your officers will carry out on your behalf, and one would hope that people will be able to achieve a decent deal and decent satisfaction. But I don't have a crystal ball. And I can't sit here and guarantee you that at the moment.
Will they be able to get another flat in the private sector with what you're going to give them?
To be fair, I'm not sufficiently aware of the Thurrock private sector housing market, but my initial reaction would be that the answer is probably yes. I think that... Sorry.
Thank you. So we have done some analysis. Obviously, the comparator that we have for property purchasing is if any of those leasehold properties have been bought in the private market recently, and as there are only 12, it's a relatively small sample, but the market rates for those particular properties and similar properties in the area are comparable. We've done a good bit of benchmarking. When it comes to the offer that was put forward to leaseholders, we did engage our legal services to make sure that we were doing the right things, really, both for our current leaseholders and for what the potential new blocks will need. So I think we're quite comfortable at this point in time that it's a reasonable offer.
Thank you. Councillor Hebb.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Julian, for your report. I said last time, as someone who lived for several years in a tower block, I personally empathise with any ambition to reconcile a very fouled concept of sort of the 1960s about communities in high-rise areas. It didn't work then, and it evidently hasn't worked now. And I think, barring a failure in nerve, it appears as though we're about to undertake quite possibly the biggest council-only led regeneration plan, certainly that I can remember. I don't know about yourselves, but that. Yeah. I mean, you know, A13 was a partnership and everything else. You know, there's partnerships in all of it. But this is the first thing. And I noticed some smiles, which is curious. So I'm glad we're in a good mood because I'm about to ask some questions on that very front. I should, before I say that, I don't know about other committees, whether they think it's relevant. You obviously probably don't need to, Joy. I personally wouldn't mind a visit to help sponsor this work. I've been in the Tilbury ones a number of times doing bits of casework and stuff like that. I wonder whether it might be worthy of the committee doing a visit to help sort of support, so you've got some more people sponsoring the work that's underway. But getting back to the substantive matter that I was about to get to, this council has no evidenced ability of delivering major projects. None at all.
Well done.
No, not at all. I said that last time, Lynn. I don't think you were here. No, I wasn't. No, we could have been, and you missed it. You missed me say it. Ah, right. But it's no secret. None at all. So my first point, and I'm not going to apologise for that either, for saying that, because it hasn't done it when it's been in partnership, and I think this is a wonderful aspiration, but for all the reasons that we know and love, I'm worried. Not because of the people in front of me, because I only have to take a step back and look at you all and see how much you care. I know that. But there is a point that we need to get to, and the one thing that this council has failed to do, despite a number of us, myself included, trying to get some milestones communicated in public and obviously being shot down on a number of occasions, that's another story altogether. I would like to see, and I'm somewhat surprised I haven't seen it here, a Gantt chart or a project plan with key milestones about when this project is expected to deliver at certain points of time. Yes, there'll be slippage. Any project plan should have slippage. But I would like a recommendation, if committee agree, to have a project plan. It's something I was striving to do, just a few months ago. It was, like I say, it was shot down. Not that I'm bitter. It was shot down not by anyone over here, but not anyone in this room. But this council, for too long, has prevented, measurable milestones being recorded in public, and then we can have a conversation. If there is project slippage, what do we need to do about it? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to put that forward as a
risk, of course.
Yes.
Next point. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Oh, sorry, Councillor Spillman.
One thing. I again, we've all experienced that anger, frustration. But one thing that housing have got is experience of delivering. Not in the numbers we would like, but of delivering projects. Whether you look at Chadwell, whether you look at Tilbury, whether you look at Echoes, whether you look at, there is experience of delivering these projects. So I hope that is some reassurance. This is a more iconic project, but I think the basis of what is, the nuts and bolts are basically similar. So I would, in housing's defence, they have been delivering projects, and I have, there are risks everywhere in these projects, so and then they need to be managed. Yeah, but not to the extent of. No, not to the extent that has frustrated Shane to the point where I don't know how he's got that wonderful head of hair, if I'm being honest. But no, they do have, the colour's gone, but the hair's still there. But no, I do have faith in them. They have got a background of delivering projects.
And I agree, and you can see from a distance some of the quality of that work, and perhaps not perhaps when this is delivered, perhaps this team will lead the projects across the rest of the borough and help fix a number of things. That'd be great. The next and Councillor Lydiard, I don't know if I'm coming in on something he was about to come on. Sorry, just on that milestones piece. I know I'm going to bang on about this, but evidently it's quite passionate for me. I'd like to know where that's going to be recorded. This is such a big project. Should it be on a corporate KPI or somewhere or something like that? This is such a big project that I think we need to know exactly where that's going to be measured and monitored. Mm-hmm. There's two other things, no, that's a lie, there's a number of things. Councillor Lydiard, you was about to talk about risk. I think there's two types of risk. There's acute risk, here and now, something that Councillor Redsell just said. I take your point. We've got another year to go. I can't explain what's happened in the past. We have got, a plan that's very clear in front of us now. I suppose the question is what are the risks that have been identified for the residents that live there now, and are we comfortable that the control measures that we've got in place to reduce that risk are satisfactory while we're doing this piece of work? Anything you said, put the frights up me. Going completely off piste a little bit now. Having conversations with residents, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's a really powerful point. You can evidently see that you believe in that quite clearly, and I think I would just stress that this is not a Thurrock Council generic, can't understand half of what's written on it letter that come through the door, this needs to be, and I know this is really easy for me to sit here and say this really does need to be a discussion, whether it be like a town hall meeting or something like that. They're not always the right things, because he who speaks loudest doesn't speak for everyone most of the time. But this definitely needs to be a verbal conversation. Does some of your points, Steve, about, does everyone understand some of the potentials and all that sort of stuff?
They do.
Possibly not, possibly. But I think I would just encourage that forum to be sort of looked at. Councillor Worrell already raised the point around pressures on the wider housing stock. I was going to raise that, but unless Councillor wanted to come back on that, I won't go over that. And I think, one last question. It mentions expert advice. Will this committee see such advice, or get an abridged summary? Or I suppose my question is how confident are we with the diligence that's been done, and who are the advisors that have advised?
I'll pick a number of those up, and then I'll let Evelina comment on anything she wants to add to, particularly the resources point. If I deal with the milestones and risk, we have an officer steering group at this point, which is the first part of the governance. Frankly, given where we are, it is embryonic, but it is starting to examine the milestones, and it's starting to examine the risks and the issues and indeed the mitigations. And forgive me, I'm not sufficiently aware of the Thurrock corporate approach, but I think it's entirely well made point that ought to go through a governance procedure and be reported. And certainly as that develops, I have little doubt that you would see it here in due course. But it is an important point, because clearly those things need to be monitored on a regular basis. In terms of the pressures on the stock, just to jump back to that, I mean, I can only just agree with you. It says it in the report. That is an issue, and it will be until they're completed. So no, there's no point pretending otherwise. The conversation point, yeah, I mean, I think we talked a bit about it last time. This is not just a letter. There will be letters, but this is not a letter alone. Housing colleagues will be visiting. They'll effectively be carrying out a housing needs assessment. They'll be essentially discussing what people need, where they need to go, where they want to go, and going through that process. In terms of advice, at the moment we are talking about two pieces of advice. One is the independent tenant advisor that is currently being procured, and that independent tenant advisor traditionally used initially in transfer situations, but increasingly used in estate renewals. And basically it is a independent advisor who essentially represents the residents, and who monitors what the council is doing, monitors those communications, helps explain the offer, helps explain the circumstances, and I suppose operates as a critical friend, if you like, and challenges and makes sure the council sticks to the job, to the task in hand, I suppose. So that's one thing that's, as I say, under procurement. The other one is your, we called it in the previous report, the multi-skilled advisors. This is design, this is cost planning, this is helping with the decanting, this is in terms of the phasing and the process. This is your technical advisor, if you like. Again, that's actually out to tender at the moment. I had a note from one of the potential bidders as the meeting started, actually. So that's the level of advice we're talking about. And are we satisfied with the level of due diligence? Well, I would certainly hope so. Your procurement people are already setting up an evaluation panel for the likes of Evelina and myself, actually. So we would look to be making sure that those were the right people. Further down the road, you'll have clerk of works and the like. And as to your own resources and whether you've got sufficient of them and whether you need others, I think that's probably the point at which I turn to my left and have talked enough.
So we're definitely recognising that this is going to be the first of this scale. which is why the initial package for the for the advice for the design and all that, we want to ensure that there is enough of external expertise coming into the team. There is already experience, as Councillor Spillman said, absolutely on delivering projects on site, and I think it was our latest report on lessons learned from one of the schemes that was very well received by this committee, where we showing the maturity to be able to deliver and then learn from what went well, what didn't go so well. So we'd definitely like to follow that track. And we will the independent advisor is very important to us, is very important to residents. One of the things that we also putting into the brief is for those to also run a steering group, a resident steering group on the ground, and to also take us to task on that. In terms of the corporate oversight, as well as the the steering group that Julian mentioned, we've got Housing Delivery Board, which is, whilst officer-led, is still a board that we run, and then there is now a newer capital projects board being set up, where the Housing Delivery Board will report to, and that's where the milestones will also be overseen and monitored as to how the delivery is going. So you make a good point in that. I'm just trying to figure out how we take that from the officer-led scrutiny across to forums like that. So probably something for us to take away and figure out how to make that link, because at the moment there probably isn't anything like that in train.
Councillor Redsell now. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've it's been spoke about so often. I think I was very surprised at our last meeting, and I'm not sure if it was Cabinet, how many people in those flats actually watch the meetings. Because I got emails back that night, and I was very surprised to think they were listening and taking it in and thanking and really were interested in what's going on. Most of those people that I've spoke to can't wait to move. They've been waiting for so many years, and I feel like I've been canvassing for so many years, and I want to see it to fruition, really. I don't want to say it in this meeting, but I think there is a piece of land that we probably could use which belongs to us. Surely we'll talk about afterwards, but that piece of land isn't being utilised at the moment at all. And we could build on that piece of land. And I think, Councillor Spielman, you spoke about private investors perhaps coming into some of this. No? I wasn't sure. So I think perhaps sometimes it might pay us to bring people on board who can do developments like this, but I think we have got options out there which we can use, which are not being utilised at the moment. And it's a bit like when I said visiting the travellers' sites. We know our own wards better than most, and I think sometimes officers don't perhaps get out there enough. Ryan knows how I feel about that, and you've got to get out there and look around, because sometimes we miss little bits and we'll go afterwards, oh, why didn't we think of that? Because we could have done that. So we'll talk about that after.
So, Chair, very briefly on land, as I said earlier, we can certainly still look at that. That's what the design people can look at. So no issue about that. And there's been a fairly wide trawl, but we can certainly look at anything else. In terms of private sector involvement in this site and in terms of development, certainly our modelling suggests that isn't appropriate here, that this is likely to be a housing revenue account scheme. Clearly we will talk to the contractors, we'll talk to the advisors, and if that changes we'll bring that back to you. But at the moment this looks like a straightforward housing revenue account scheme for which the council pays.
And I just meant that perhaps we can get advice from those sort of people that might know better than us, you know, how to deliver these projects, you know, because we're not always in the best place to deliver projects. I know we've done a few, but this is a big project, because we're not talking about just decanting those 3 blocks. The way it reads in here, we're looking at putting more, and that's more in my ward.
Absolutely,
that means I've got to do a lot more work.
That's what they're for.
So
Quite right.
Thank you.
Councillor Lilliard.
Just wondering if the green belt that you're using, do you have to pay, assuming it belongs to Thurrock Council, do you have to pay the going building rate to the revenue account? Because, or is it housing land as such?
No, it's green.
So my understanding is that this is playing fields, so it's general fund land. Internally, your accountants would make a form of transfer. That would not be at the market value rate, because bear in mind that this is a housing revenue account scheme. It's another reason why you're doing that. But there would be an internal transfer. But I mean, basically, this is one part of the council transferring to another. So it's we're not talking high stakes here. We're talking about you know, a relatively modest book transaction within the accounts.
I'm not sure that they will let you get away with that, but
No.
you know, it's got to go to planning. It's got to go to all sorts of places.
So, Chair, to be clear, if I may, it is not a market value transaction between the housing revenue account and the general fund. It will be a book transfer. There is no sale here. There is no market value sale. This is affordable housing. In some instances, quite frankly, I've seen deals where they transfer at £1. It is not categorically a market value transfer.
As we're joined by Councillor Spilman, just wants a couple of minutes on this one.
Just to say that, I mean, we've spoken to, thanks for the feedback, I've been really, one of the main themes has been feedback from ward members, and any discussions been, and that's progressed really nicely. It's work I did with Councillor Worrell, those discussions on all the developments, and I brought Blackshots into that, even though it was from the old list. But as I understand it, every effort's going to be made. I mean, it is a very small strip of land, but every effort's going to be made to replace that piece of land within Blackshots. But that is something that every effort will be made to do. A more general point about the scheme. I mean, we're a very lucky committee tonight, and I feel like a very fortunate portfolio holder because, and I'll feel like a very fortunate cabinet member when this gets delivered, because we're the group that have been lucky enough to have input into getting those families out of those flats. And that is a very special moment. But not only that, this whole scheme is a blueprint for someone who comes after me. I mean, I probably won't see, as portfolio holder, I hope not actually, the completion of these blocks, because I'll be long gone before those the new build is built. But this is a blueprint for all of those towers to go eventually. And if we can now collectively work together and succeed, then whoever comes after us, there's no excuse. You know, the blueprint's there, the success is there. They need to crack on and get rid of the rest as well. So this is a very, very important scheme. We can't mess this up because the future of all the tower blocks depends on us getting this right. I'm going to make a move, but thank you very much for your time tonight. It's been most appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spilman, for coming in. Yeah, I just wanted to say a few bits on this, really, not so much questions, but it's more, obviously there's lots of residents that need to move and want to move, and they're desperate in that they you know, the state that they're in, they don't want to be living in that way, and we should do this as quickly as possible, and I think I've said that many times in the past. But there are some that may be attached to their home regardless of the state, and they might be, you know, they don't want to move, and you have to do that in the most compassionate way. I understand that people, you know, are going to have lots of different views on that, but I think although I fully support this, and by the sounds of it, the whole committee does, in getting the residents out of these blocks and actually getting them into homes that are fit for purpose. But my real worry, and I think it's something that Councillor Hebb picked up on, is obviously, and I know we've said about our record on delivering things hasn't been fantastic, and I know we've done little pockets, and I know Beaconsfield, for an example, that we discussed in one of the last meetings, where is a great project. There was problems, and this is a much bigger project. And what I don't want to do is, one of the outcomes of this could be that we demolish it. Yes, we get the residents out, and we get them into suitable homes, but then we leave it. And I don't want this to be the housing's version of the Stamford Station. So we need to make sure that we deliver it. Exactly. So.
Sorry, Chair. Remissly, I never commented on that point when somebody else made the point about it. The line about the fallback is there. The line about that is there because it is showing you the journey and showing that you've got contingencies. And if you really couldn't make a scheme stack, that's what you could do. If there's no way that's an aspiration, that is really trying to show you a contingency and show that you don't have to commit to vast sums of money right now. You have options along the way, but it is no more than that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You've got to look at our full positions, but at that stage, I think that would be a travesty to not only take up homes that they're going to be decanting to, but then not have the homes to replace them. Puts more pressure on the system. So with that, we've got the recommendations. We've got Councillor Head would like to put a recommendation forward if everybody is in agreement with this. Do you want to read this out, Councillor Head?
Yeah.
Just draft, rip it to pieces as you want. The overview and scrutiny request regular public reporting on project milestones, including slippage factors, and request officers confirm to committee, at a future point obviously, what members-led mechanism will be used to review adherence to plan.
Very good.
Does that
Yes.
sound right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to see a critical path and question as well.
Be advised at all stages.
I've not lost the agenda now.
Sorry, can I ask you to...
Oh, sorry.
So, was the committee happy with that recommendation, the wording? Brilliant.
Happy until we see that, yeah.
Yeah, I think a good project Gantt chart and looking at the way forward is definitely something that we need.
We should do it right through the council.
Absolutely, on absolutely everything, Yeah, no excuses. So with that, we've got recommendations on page 42 and 43, which is 1.1 through to 1.11. Our committee in agreement with those? Agreed?
Yeah.
Agreed, brilliant, thank you. So, with that, we move to... No, no more juggling, I promise. We are now back onto the agenda as proper, which is now item 5, which is the estates and tenancy management roles and responsibilities. Could Peter Doherty please present your report?
Thank you, Chair. This report is presented to the committee to explain how we currently deliver the estate and management services, but also to highlight the future ambition for the roles and responsibilities relating to estate and tenancy management. So the report's effectively in two parts, as I said there from the introduction. The first part sets out, say, what we're doing at the present moment in time, but more importantly, I think what I would like committee to note is our future plans for the actual services. So I'll just go through this in a kind of brief overview. So as things currently stand, the provision of estate and management services in Thurrock is undertaken by the tenancy management, neighbourhood, caretaking and antisocial behaviour teams. And also the grounds maintenance is undertaken by the Clean and Green Service under a service level agreement, which is currently being reviewed. And that is something that, if you would like me to take it back to a committee at some point in the future, I'd be happy to do. So the two principal roles really around estates management are the tenancy management officer and the neighbourhood officer. In 2.3, I've set out there the principal roles of the tenancy management officer, and I'll just quickly kind of allude to those. They're undertaking tenancy audits, which committee might recall I brought a paper here about 18 months ago. Functions around starting and ending tenancies, and then the aspects around managing tenancies and enforcement and managing the communal clear policy as well. The officers also undertake a management of low-level ASB and tenancy sustainment. So what I've tried to do in the report is give you some indication about where we are in terms of satisfaction levels currently as of the end of December for the year. So they're kind of set out there. I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have at the end of the presentation in relation to that. In relation to tenancy sustainment, I've given two examples at the back just to reference out what tenancy sustainment looks like in reality. And they're set out there as well. More than happy to go through those examples with you as well. So with the tenancy management officers, the environment in which we operate has really substantially changed over the last 2 to 3 years. The big issues like COVID, Grenfell and the cost of living has kind of brought us towards a more kind of tenants or resident-focused service. And that's one where, really, as a consequence, the aspects around estates is really going to be pushed out towards the neighbourhood officers and the caretakers. An example I gave of the role becoming more resident-focused is around the tenancy audits. And as I say, I've provided some information there, but it's also one of the reports, as I say, that I brought previously to the committee, so you'll be familiar with the tenancy audits and the changing nature of the focus there as well. Now, we do recognise the role comes with a number of current challenges. The current operational environment is often fragmented into specific areas that each focus on kind of resolving problems, frequently defined by thresholds and eligibility criteria. And support is often standardised and focused solely on the one single need. So, for example, a tenancy management officer could encounter someone who has got mobility issues, having difficulty dressing, is a smoker or has obesity issues, and is in rent arrears. Those four key aspects are dealt with by different services. You've got the mobility through occupational therapy, the difficulty around dressing, community nursing, smoking, obesity, public health issues, and the rent arrears by our rents team as well. So the TMO might come across those issues, but they're often dealt with virtually in silos. So that's kind of, to say, highlights that. The one thing that I want to reference as well, which goes on at 2.6, is around the 2014 restructure. There was a real failure to provide adequate services around estate management services, and certainly three people around this table I've had quite a lot of dealings with, Councillor Worrell and Lydiard, around the nature of the way that we manage our estates and the areas as well around some of our street properties as well. In 2009, this was identified, and actually the neighbourhood officer role was created to actually address that gap, to try and deal with those particular issues around our estates. So just picking up on 2.8, I've kind of highlighted what the principal functions were for the neighbourhood housing officers. They are to undertake estate inspections, identify environmental improvements, but also to liaise with, in partnership working around the public realm. But again, when that role was set up, it was kind of limited because of the budget that was available. So the team's capacity is limited. They cover the whole of the borough, should I say, in terms of HRA. And that results in them effectively taking inspections every 12 weeks. So it really doesn't kind of enable us to prioritise risk around our estates. But again, if you've only got a small number of staff, you know, you've got to go with what you can do. That's kind of exacerbated by the fact that they're limited by their access to digital systems and processes. So they're still doing paper-based estate inspections, which obviously is very, very time-consuming. But it also, on top of them being ineffective, and in terms of efficiency and effectiveness, that's really impacted. But it also means that it's difficult sometimes to hold other departments accountable. So, Councillor Lydiard, we've referenced a number of times, haven't we, about the repairs aspect and about the feedback loop and that's certainly one of the key issues that they've got as well. 210 and 211 are then just highlighted to say the caretaking and antisocial behaviours kind of key functions as well. So turning to the ambitions, I think this is the one thing that you probably would like to talk to me in some more detail about, bearing in mind the questions that I've had so far this evening. The Housing Strategy 2027 sets the basis for our new way of working in Thurrock. And this is set out with 8 key principles, and they're set out there. These are referenced back in the Health and Wellbeing Strategy, as I say, and in the Housing Strategy as well. So they're kind of the push for the way that we're dealing with things in the future. So this year, we're developing housing support and services to embed these core principles, and also to embed a person-centred approach, which we've talked about a couple of times this evening. Councillor Spillman referenced as well. This should enable officers to better challenge current delays, the bureaucracy, the barriers and inefficiencies that they're kind of facing. And as a team, hopefully this will broaden their opportunities to interact with residents. So those aspects that we talked about previously, some of those things they should be able to take on board. But I've given you an example at 3.4 of one of the issues that we may encounter, and you can see again how the bureaucracy can kind of kick in. So, for example, a tenancy management officer comes across a resident who requires a grab rail. As things currently stand, the officer would have to refer this to Thurrock first, who would then assess whether an occupational therapist is required. Assessment is then undertaken, and a 9-page document is completed by the resident. Now, that process can take weeks or even months, depending on the capacity and also the workloads of officers. And all this time as well, the tenancy management officer is not updated. So rarely do our TMOs actually get information about what's actually occurred when they've undertaken such a visit. The new way of working would enable the officer to undertake an assessment with the resident using OT guidelines. So again, these areas that I kind of referenced earlier, with some basic training, some of the low-level stuff, they could pick that up. They could order the works directly without the need for an onward referral, therefore reducing back, bureaucracy, time and the resources, but ultimately providing a better service to the resident. Residents not having to do with 4 or 5 different people, different services. They can deal with the one individual. That's just a simple example of potentially how it might work. So this new role, which we're calling the locality officer, will continue to deliver the core functions and responsibilities of the tenancy management officer. But these will be delivered with a more person-centred approach, tailored to the individual needs of the resident. So the locality officer role will be underpinned by a locality and neighbourhood model of integrated housing services at systems and place level. So to give you an example, at the present moment in time, we're using the Corringham Integrated Medical and Welfare Centre. We've got 3 of the tenancy management officers who are based there, and they're going to be working down there and basically working with colleagues from adult social care, from children's services, public health and National Health Service partners. And the idea is that they would start to organically develop relationships so they're able to get information around families and individuals, and ultimately provide that service to residents and a much more person-centred approach. So it's our ambition that through this integrated working, officers will develop new skills, and that this will lead to a kind of a blended role across the council. So that is one of the things I think that you'll see in the future, a lot more of this talk about blended roles, and it's certainly something that we've started to hear from the commissioners as well. And finally, I just wanted to kind of reference back, and this is the big issue that you've all picked up with us as well. At place level, officers will be expected to take greater responsibility for their estates and neighbourhoods. So officers will undertake regularised diary inspections, and most importantly, these will be with councillors and with residents. So we will offer that opportunity. It will be diarised and it will be published on our website, so everybody knows when those will take place. The other thing that we'll be ensuring as well, we'll move to a digital platform which will enable officers to better record and track repairs, which, as I say, has been a long-standing issue that I've been getting from you as councillors as well, and ultimately making us more accountable. So that's it, and really in a kind of very swift way, the plans that we've got for the services going forward. Any questions?
Thank you. Could you pop your mic up, please? Thank you. Councillor Redstone.
Thank you, Peter. You've probably answered quite a few of my questions, actually, so I probably won't have as many now. But I'm not sure I agree with the new role, because I think, why have we got estate officers now who sometimes don't do the job they're supposed to do? You know, we've been on quite a few site visits, and I've got 4 things haven't been done now. So, still haven't been done. And that sort of thing worries me when you go out for a site visit, and you know how I feel. You know, if we go out for a site visit and you want something done, you expect it over the few months to be done. And if it doesn't get done, they're not doing their job, really, because estates is where they're supposed to be. You've already brought up the sweeping and mopping of external areas, and it says carry out visual checks on communal areas. Well, in the 3 blocks that we're hopefully taking down, there are no communal areas in there. So sometimes they don't know the area they're working in, you know, and that worries me, to think that they haven't been out and had a look. And I just wonder if the new role, while we haven't made the estates officers more accountable, the ones we've got now, you know. And I've got to say, we all know Bill Sargent, and he is one of those people I'd like to give some praise to, because he always answers his phone, he always tries to help, and I think sometimes you've got to give praise where praise is due. And I've known Bill for a long, long time, and he does his job. Always, yeah, and I think sometimes we've got to do that. You know, there are good officers out there, and perhaps not so good. But I think when someone does their job as it's supposed to be, and estate officers, I just want to see them out there. I know Lynn Steve probably feels the same. And I haven't got that many council houses, and my one gripe is that we give someone a council house within whatever, a block. We don't ask that council tenant to take some responsibility of where they live, you know, and what is outside. They're given a garden, they're given a front garden, and it's a mess, you know. And you've got people who've bought their houses either side, and that obviously people come to buy a house and they go to look at the property that's in the middle. I think, well, I'm not going to live here because of the mess. So I think we've got a big learning curve to make it better, and you seem like you've come in and you're making it better, I hope. But I just want to see those estates officers we've got now getting out there, all this paperwork and everything else. We should be out there looking, you know. And some of them, Peter, are quite minimal to do. You know, to make the areas look better is not hard. You know, to work in with cleaning and greening, and, you know, it's not a hard thing to do. It's just getting on top of it and doing it and making the area look better, you know. But you have answered quite a few of my questions, so what I've got crossed down, you've answered. Thank you, Peter.
I mean, the further comments I'd just like to make, Councillor Redall. I mean, I take on board your concerns. I mean, one of the things that we have introduced are the action plans, and I certainly, you know, we've introduced them now on a number of areas, and they've worked quite well. I mean, ultimately, some degree of accountability. But I think one of the biggest issues is around the lack of a digital platform, because that enables us to have greater transparency, you know, further up the chain as well, from a management perspective as well. So we've developed the Power BI reports, and I think you may have had some previous reference back about the Power BI reports, but it's a new way of actually collecting data but reporting. It's very, very good for us. So one of the questions that came up previously about the caretaking is very, very important. We're now able to pull together our satisfaction results around the caretaking to an individual estate, to a block. So I can actually see the ratings that are given over a period of time. And so what we're looking at now is actually using that as a kind of a way to actually see where we're not performing very well. Now, previously, when it's paper-based, it's very difficult to do that. But say the information, once it's gone digital and we're able to then utilise that information, then we can get far greater transparency and enable us to focus in the areas where we need to. So that's one of the things that we're really going to focus on going forward. In terms of the neighbourhood officers as well, just so I've got clarity around this, And I'm going to be very honest with you here as well. When I said about in 2014, when the restructure took place and effectively there was a kind of withdrawal from the estates, that's what happened, in essence. There was a kind of, the estate inspections were kind of pulled back and there wasn't that focus. The focus came back in 2019 because we were drawn in that way because of the level of complaints we were receiving and insurance claims. And as a consequence of that, they put the team in place, the neighbourhood team, and that is the estate-based team. And there has always been this thing about the tenancy management team. We're inward-looking in terms of the flats and the blocks, the external environment. 2019, along came a team of it's only 3 officers, neighbourhood team, and they've got to cover the whole borough. So, yeah, if it's paper-based, it's you're never going to get kind of the same results if you haven't got it digitalised. So that's one of the reasons why we're going to be investing, in that area. So we've got that digitalised. But with the new roles, they'll have that information. We will have that information, and we should be able to really kind of drive those kind of improvements that you're looking for.
Making people who get a council house be a bit more responsibility, take responsibility for where they live.
Yeah, absolutely. I say it's a standard part of the tenancy terms and conditions when when they sign up and when we meet them. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Worrell.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing this report up. It's something that I asked to come here because I really feel strongly that there's some areas around Thurrock that are pretty much a disgrace, to be honest. We've got estates that are really an embarrassment, and then you've got really nice estates. So it's not across the board, but everywhere should be a nice place to live. I think that it does need to be some joint up working. I think that there's, why does it take a councillor to have to report a piece of fly tipping that's been there 6 weeks? Yeah. Right, it shouldn't take a councillor because, I've reported fly tipping that caretakers must be walking past it daily. Housing officers must be walking past it daily. I had a piece of fence repaired because it was a disgrace. I think Councillor Mays reported the same fence. They put a new fence up and left the old fence there. It's 2 years later and the other fence is still there and some of the gaps are still there. And you know what? It just amazes me that everybody assumes that it's somebody else's job to do something, and that's why we're in this mess. So I think that I really want to believe that things are going to get better. I really do, because I think that I will not be happy and I will keep beating the drum until estates officers are responsible for estates. We shouldn't have to tell you when there's antisocial behaviour and, car engines are being changed on council roads and cars are left jacked up for months and nobody, where are the estate officers? They should be there. I want somebody to take responsibility for making sure that them estate officers are doing their jobs. And why are we still working paper-based? We talk about the HRA is a protected budget, okay, and we pay other departments quite a nice lot of money, actually. We could probably buy in some of these services a lot cheaper than what we're paying other departments in the council. Yet our officers are still working in the dark ages on bits of paper. When we've got, good money in the HRA, that's got to stop, because I think that they should have to go out and do, in a month, they should be on so many streets. And they should say, there's so many potholes, so many this, so many that, so many that. And then somebody else should be checking that they haven't sat and done that on their dashboard from their desk and just wrote it. Because I think sometimes that happens as well. Dashboards can be manipulated. So I want it to be good. I'm just not sure it's as good as, what we think it is. And I'm sorry about that, but, Councillor Spillman's found a block of flats. He shouldn't have been able to find that block of flats because it shouldn't have been there to find.
Councillor Lydiard.
Thanks, Chair. I actually have a very good relationship with my TMOs and, Bill Sargent and Natalie and various other people. I welcome what you're saying about new technology. I know a lot of the London boroughs use cameras as well, so that, you know, if they go and wash down a few stairs, they take a photo, send it off within seconds, you know it's been done. It would be really good if I could have a once a week hour with the TMO to say, right, what needs to be done? What's the priority? Because I know you can't do everything all at the same time. You know, there's jobs that must be done, would like to be done, and well, that will get done as and when. But generally, I welcome the report. I really like the strategy that we saw a while ago. So the only other thing is, if you're going to implement it, can we try it in Tilbury first? Because I'm for it. And
Fight.
Priority.
and what I would like to do is be the guinea pig
Yeah.
down there.
Why not?
Because I mean, you know, we've got a lot of council houses. We've got a lot, you know, one or two ghettos. We have.
There's a song there, isn't there, somewhere?
Oh, I don't know. Do you want to sing it?
No.
Yeah. So I would like to be a trial.
Yeah.
Let's work out
That's
what's
good.
good and what's not so good, and go from there. Thanks.
Councillor Hebb.
Just a few quick bits to add. I mean, look, just looking at the report, it seems to be a very sensible approach. Seems like 2019, you know, there was an approach, been partially successful, but, you know, you don't need to be an expert on statistical variation to know that a downward trend for 12 months is telling us something. So if you need to change something, and that, you know, is quite bold in what you're seeking to do, but it's quite practical as well. It feels very commonsensical, very authentic. So, you know, I wish you all best speed. Whoever wins the fight to be the pilot, I shall let you lot do all that. One just thing I'm just not reconciling. The council was sought to sort of tell residents for a long time to report things online, using like the whole report on the website. Why don't our people do that on a smartphone? I know I'm probably oversimplifying that, but why don't they report it on the same system? Because then that would presumably generate the report that Steve was talking about. And I don't know. Is it just me?
Not everybody's got a smartphone.
Shouldn't be a pen and paper, should they?
It should absolutely. For categorically, I completely agree.
There's hundreds of people in
No.
have a
Just said that,
smartphone.
Steve.
Sorry, just for the benefit of record, I'm talking about our staff who go out on the estate. You know, we're saying about things not being reported or doing it on bits of paper.
What happens in the London boroughs?
Well, I mean, I genuinely can't believe in 2023 we're talking about it, to be honest with you. It just seems ludicrous. But I just wondered, is there a reason why we don't use the same system?
Why we don't use the same system? I mean, I'm not too sure, to be honest with you. Ryan?
Thank you. So, behind the scenes, we have the situation that different services of the council use different technological systems. Our housing management system is a different one to the one used in other areas of the organisation that deal with online reporting for fly tipping or, for example, collection of bits and pieces all over the place. As a resident, I use it myself. I think it's fantastic. It'd be great to have the same thing within housing. We are taking steps in that direction, looking to expand the use of our online services for our tenants. We've got access to rent account information and online bidding, but certainly being able to raise their concerns, whether that's a estate matter or a tenancy management matter. We are in the process of getting those off the ground, and hopefully when we get to summer, we'll have something positive to be able to come forward and share. So kind of watch this space. But the reason it doesn't happen at the moment is it's simply behind the scenes. There are different systems being used. If I know it's not my report, but just so badly. There are just two things I wanted to come and say very quickly, if that's okay. Councillor Redstall, you made a point about officers fulfilling duties at the moment and the change of role or a new role. And actually, I think the aspiration for this is some of the barriers that stop officers doing what they need to do, and it feels like things aren't getting done, is actually that they're not empowered to do those things. If we can take away the referral, if we can remove the red tape and get officers to the point where they can do the right thing quicker, actually, some of those barriers do just dissolve away. And Councillor Redsall, your point about officers being out and about and why should it be a member has to report something. This integration with adult social care and health and children's services works both ways. So we increase the eyes on our estates by working closer with our partners across the council and in health services. There's 22 different teams working out of the Corringham Integrated Medical and Wellbeing Centre at the moment. I think they count housing as just one team. So there is a huge number of professionals. We were there 2 weeks ago when we were introduced to the community nursing team, and we had a really good conversation about what would you do if you were in a property with hoarding, and they had questions for us as well. And just building those links organically means that actually we can all come together a little bit better to identify the problems in both directions. So sorry, Councillor Hebb, to hijack your point, but I was bursting to say those things.
Right, and just cautious of time, is it last one? Have you got just more bits?
Is this going to Cabinet, or is this just is a service decision that you're having the courtesy of having that conversation with us? Okay. Yeah, for me, just for clarity, I support. I support. The one thing I would say is, in light of what I've just been told about digital systems, I would urge you to go and engage with our IT and transformation colleagues in particular about the customer service strategy. Oh, I had many conversations about that, and yes, I would urge you to look at that, because the whole ethic was about customer self-service, and it seems remarkable that, yeah, have a chat.
I mean, I've got just on that. I mean, I don't know if we're allowed to make recommendations to this one, but I certainly would be happy to say put a recommendation on that to say that we would be wanting to use technology so that we can get reports, and as ward councillors, if we can have a report of an overview of what's going on,
Get the transformation team in here.
and you can have it. You can have that pretty quickly in the sense of what gets to us, and we can work with that as well. So. I don't know wording on that, but we can sort that
Go on,
out.
Jenny, good luck.
Yeah. So just really quickly, because of course of the time, we've got Councillor Lydiard and Councillor Redsall, but Councillor Lydiard first.
Very quickly, you talk about efficiencies. Is that saving money, or is it going to cost us more?
What I say is about providing a better service. So that whole thing about countables and uncountables, you know, it's about providing a better service. That's the key thing. So. Savings isn't necessarily, I think, the key driver here. It's about providing a better service.
So it's going to cost us more?
Not necessarily.
Right. Sorry.
Yes, nothing to add. I mean, it is better service. It's going to save officers time. Just going by the examples that Peter mentioned, in terms of those referrals, the sort of repeating the same story, making residents to fill out long form, all of that. So overall, we will see saving in time, in our time, and in resident time, and better service.
Okay, I've been in local government for a long time, and I know sometimes I've seen, you know, service improvements come along, and everyone's got a rise in pay, and I'm just wondering, is there any sort of things you haven't told us about?
In terms of increasing costs?
Increasing pay scales and...
At the present moment in time, no,
Right.
honestly.
And finally, Councillor Redsall.
Yeah, just picking up what Councillor Hebb said, actually, I mean, we're told to report things through members' inquiries, and then a little paragraph down the bottom says, try not to report things but make your residents report them. I'm sorry, either they don't know what our job is, or... You know, because if
That's a different conversation.
it is, but it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah,
It's you're asking, as Councillor Lydiard said earlier, a lot of our members, old residents, don't use technology. You know, and their only way is to come to us and to get it out there. So you know, we're not all digital. You know, I'm sure Councillor Walls in her ward's got lots of people that are just not digitally minded and don't want to be. You know, and that's what our role is for. That's why we're councillors, you know, to take things forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So, are members in agreement with the recommendations on the report on page 15?
Agreed.
Agreed? Excellent. So we've got 15 minutes. We've got two items, which I think, one of which is a conversation, a briefing note, which I know we all want to do, and the other one is a very important one about the Homes for Ukraine response programme. So I'm going
to extend it for talk now.
I would like to
15 minutes each bit.
So I'd like to move a motion to, without notice, to suspend the council procedure rule 1.1 to allow the meeting to continue beyond the 2.5-hour limit by another 15 minutes.
Yeah,
Committee
15
happy
minutes
with that?
apiece. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've got 15 minutes each agenda item now. So with that, we move on to.
Doesn't mean you've got 15 minutes to allow.
Yeah. So we've got item 6, Homes for Ukraine response programme. Can Dalal please present your report?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. The Homes for Ukraine report sets out the Council's response to the Homes for Ukraine scheme that was launched in March 2022. The information contained in the report updates members on the support and duties that the Council has under the scheme and the funding received to fulfil our duties. I'm not going to read the whole report, but what I will do is highlight the key headlines for members to note at 4.3 in the report. Thurrock has had 116 sponsors matched to 244 Ukrainian guests, of whom 130 have arrived and 74 have stayed in Thurrock to live. There's been one unaccompanied minor aged 17 years old that has arrived to live in Thurrock. 11 guests have made homeless presentations requiring housing assistance, and 3 of them have been housed in temporary accommodation. 56 guests have left Thurrock to live with family and friends or move closer to work. 4 guests have returned to Ukraine but can return to the UK within 3 years. We have received a total of £959,000 of Home Ukraine funding, and this is subject to increase with new arrivals in 2023. The Council has paid a total of £21,000 in welcome payments to Ukrainian guests, £96,250 in total value sponsor payments, and £48,300 in top-up payments to hosts. The highest concentration of refugees live in Averley, Uplands and Chafford and North Stifford, Grays, Thurrock and Ockenden. The private housing team have delivered the Council's response to carrying out property checks, resettlement support to hosts and guests, and rematching to help guests find new housing options if asked to leave. The second half of my report at point 9 highlights the new government measures announced in January to sustain the scheme without becoming a burden on local authorities. And these are a new self-rematching scheme to encourage guests to find new hosts before approaching the Council, hosts to receive £500 a month as a thank you payment for ongoing support after 12 months. The government have allocated £150 million homeless funding, and that's going to be divvied out prorated on the number of Ukrainian guests in your area, and this is the Council's biggest challenge if homeless presentations steadily rise. The Home Office have also allocated £650 million of money for housing for local authorities to acquire new stock for refugees. The Council are not exploring this option at the moment because of the Section 114 notice and the match funding required of borrowing to buy properties on the open market to keep rents affordable. There's also going to be a new marketing campaign by the Home Office to urge new sponsors to come forward as the war worsens, and the Council, all councils will receive a reduction in tariff funding to £5,900 per person for all new arrivals from the 1st of January 2023. That ends my report, so I'm happy to take questions and for members to note the recommendations at 1.1 and 1.3.
Thank you for your report. Do members have any comments or questions? Councillor Hebb.
Thanks, Dalal. And before I start, I just want to say thank you to everyone who has been involved with this. I mean, I don't know about everyone else, but this time last year when I was watching fathers put their little girls on buses and that had a profound effect on me. I'm not going to lie. You know, I've no doubt it was the same for everyone, and I never thought I'd live to see that. You know, something that my nan would talk to me about things like that. You know, evacuations and stuff. And I never thought I'd live to see the day where. Yeah. Anyway. So thank you, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for all that you've done to help this humanitarian crisis, and you know, ultimately the objective is to help people return back to Ukraine when Vladimir Putin's aggression is thwarted once and for all, and here's to it happening as quickly as possible and justice delivered. So I've just got a few things to speak about today, or ask if that's okay. One around the 10%. There's a 10%, I don't want to say dropout, it's the withdrawal, it was the expression used, wasn't there, of hosts. And the conversation I've had with a sponsor is about some potential, and bear in mind, I would say that the sponsor I was speaking to started this very much in its infancy, or enrolled on the programme very much in its infancy, so things may have evolved since then. But is there a possibility that the reason why 10% have sort of withdrawn is possibly because of, not of a lack of understanding, but perhaps not a full appreciation of what the role of a host is? You know, I think our greatest impulse was if you had a spare room, you would want to do it, but it might have come with some complications. So I'd just be curious to sort of unpick a little bit what that 10%, what the root cause of that is, if you like. I'd just like to have a bit of a conversation, reference some stuff that was spoken about in page 34 of the report around the wraparound services, and I very much welcome that, because there is an element of pastoral care needed for, you know, frankly, people that have left a snap of a finger in the most harrowing and awful circumstances imaginable. You know, our legal framework is different here. Our customs are different. Our behaviours are different, possibly. You know, we have things like the NHS, which I don't know if Ukraine does have. So I'd just be curious to know how we pastorally help. Is that a word? I don't know. Support people coming over from Ukraine and trying to sort of accommodate that life over here as best possible. The other thing is, I think there is some narrative around here. I just wanted to have a little bit more detail around the ongoing wellbeing and suitability assessment between host and sponsor. They're the same thing, host and guest, sorry. Things change, you know, especially in the current economic climate, you know, with inflation and everything else. There might have explained my own question, the 10%, I don't know. But I suppose my question is just understanding whether domestic situations are the same, can still support some guests, and how regular that conversation's happening. You know, is there a rolling review that's happening? I think it is answered in here, but just a little bit more of that. And also, just lastly, again, some feedback I got around some of the guidance that was perhaps given out through the job centre. Perhaps, you know, I understand, and this is third party, so forgive me for that, but I understand that some of the guidance is about, you know, you can build a life, build a career, and all that sort of stuff. Now, for me, we want them to go back to their husbands, their wives, their wider families. So the aspiration's a good one, but I think we also want to kind of keep it in check, and you know, let's hope to God that we're saying goodbye, God bless, you know, as quickly as possible. So anyway, they're the points I wanted to raise, apart from a very big thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hebb. So in terms of the 10% of the number of sponsors that have withdrawn from the scheme, that's made up of properties that are unsuitable, as well as circumstances of the sponsors have changed. So in terms of what support we've provided to sponsors and guests, we've produced a welcome sponsors pack and also a guest handbook, as well as we have produced like a template of house rules, which is something that the sponsors have asked, so that there's more clarity on the role of the sponsor, and also expectation or rules around what the guests would hope. And that's helped in terms of resolving problems with relationship breakdowns.
And did it come out originally, or was that something that's evolved?
That's something that's evolved. It's something that we've done as we've learnt lessons through this process. In terms of resettlement support, so the Well Home officers provide a range of resettlement support, and that includes from identifying if there's any health referrals in regards to any trauma that has come from, like, the children or from the adults. We've also helped with school admissions, school uniforms. We've also talked to sponsors and guests regarding their housing options, and we're also at the moment producing like a housing options update for the website, and we have been regularly producing newsletters that go out electronically to sponsors, and that covers a range of issues that helps support the sponsors and the guests. And we're in regular conversations with the Job Centre around employment options. And then finally, in terms of like property checks or safeguarding checks, we do monthly checks on our guests and sponsors to check that everything is okay. And we work very closely with the adults team and children's team. If there are any concerns that are flagged, we do joint visits. And in terms of the scheme from like March to date, we've not had some of the safeguarding concerns that have been flagged in the national press regarding exploitation or inappropriate behaviour. So that's not something that's been occurring in Thurrock.
Sorry, can I I know I've got Councillor Redcell and Councillor Worrell who just wants to ask questions. We've got 5 minutes left on this item, so sorry to cut you off on that one. But Councillor Redcell.
Sorry, I'll be quick. I haven't really got that amount of questions. Just really on 4.3, Delau, the one unaccompanied minor. Can you tell us how old this person was? He's 17, so he's got another year to go.
No, he's turned 18, so private fostering has closed the case. Yeah.
Okay. The other thing is Ukrainian guests do have the right to leave the homes for schemes. That worries me to think if they move away or anywhere else in the UK, they get lost in the system.
They don't actually get lost in the system. What happens is Thurrock still have a duty to the Ukrainian guest. So if there's any if they do go and live in another part of the borough, if they have problems with housing options or anything else, they are referred back to Thurrock for help and support, which is part of that funding that we received to help Ukrainian guests.
I only asked that, because it says elsewhere in the UK. I mean, that's quite an extensive area, isn't it? I just worry that they could go off and never be seen again. You know, I don't know. I hope not, but that worries me they get lost in that system wherever they go. So you're telling me that won't happen?
Well, they've got their BIP card, which is valid for 3 years, and obviously, if they've got children, that there is a track to make sure that the children are still in education. For single adults, obviously that differs because most of the people that have come through our front door have been adults. So they've generally moved on to live closer to family, friends, or for work. That's what we've seen.
The other one, sorry, was 7.2, 6 months check in person. Do you think that's enough, a 6 months check? That's half a year, isn't it? A lot can happen.
Yeah, that's. I mean, we do monthly checks, but the 6 month check is the government's guidance on what's expected of local authorities as part of the scheme conditions.
Sorry. Thank you. Councillor Worrell.
Done an absolutely amazing job, like having to step up like everybody else, like we couldn't be prepared for this, could we, really? So it's been amazing to see how people like call to arms and, and how many families did step up. And that the government sent money, which was good too. And I wanted to look at that, the money. So if you add up the welcome payment, so I was doing this at home today, it's 21,000 to the total number of £350 sponsor payments, the 96,250 top-up payments. So this all sort of comes up to a lot of money still, but we received 959,000, but there doesn't seem to be, that leaves about under £800,000. Where is that money sitting? What is it doing? You know, from the amount of money that we paid out to everybody, but we got 959,000. You know, where is that money sitting and what is it for?
Okay, so you're right. It is the government have given us and all local authorities a considerable amount of money. In terms of the money, it is subject to increase with new arrivals, but the government will also be carrying out a reconciliation exercise. So where people have left, in terms of like maybe return back to their own country, then that amount could reduce. So there's going to be further guidance on the reconciliation process. In terms of what the council are doing with that money, that funds like staff costs, as well as like publications, events that we're hosting. The money will last for 3 years, so it isn't that we're going to spend the whole of the money in year one. We have to make sure that money's spread over 3 years to make sure that it's no extra burden on the council.
So it's sitting ring-fenced somewhere. That's what I was like. I didn't want it to be in a pot somewhere that it weren't ring-fenced off. So it's like in the Ukraine families ring-fenced pot. Thank you.
If I could just also add, it was a snapshot in time. That's right, and there's a lot of staff cost yet not necessarily reflected in that briefing note that we're trying to get from staff members, because across the council there's been a number of teams. There was a proper joint effort across all sort of departments to deliver that, and we're trying to capture all of that as well. So there's a lot more to be accounted for within that sum, and then the rest is ring-fenced for that.
And can I just ask about the homeless, the families that end up homeless, or the people that end up homeless? Does that come out of this pot of money and not out of our general HRA? So are you allowed to pull from this money, considering, you know, like it is difficult times, and, you know, and the HRA tends to pay for a lot of stuff?
Yeah, so in terms of families that we have provided assistance to, yes, we have used the funding under this scheme. Going forward, though, the government have announced like additional funding to help local authorities, so it doesn't become a short-term or long-term burden on local authorities. So there is like an exit strategy for local authorities to help fund temporary accommodation costs.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'll be very brief, and it'll probably just a yes or no. If we don't use this money, it can't be used for anything else, can it? I know you said it's ring fence, but we're not going to suddenly see hundreds of thousands go elsewhere. Just a yes or no would be brilliant. So that's a no. Right, brilliant. Thank you. So with that, are all members?
Could you? I had a quick look on the website. Could you send us the pack, if you all want it, by the way? Send us these welcome packs. It's something I'm really bothered about, and it would just be great if you could send those out. I don't know if you need it as a recommendation, but it would be good to see. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, could we have it as a recommendation? Is that right? And then.
And that's the welcome pack, isn't it?
Yeah, and then we can take any comments offline, can't we, between us all, have a conversation.
So yeah, if we can add that as, what would that be, recommendations 1.4, that the welcome pack be sent to the members of this committee. So with that, are all members in agreement with the recommendations on page 30?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. So moving on to item 9, which is a briefing note on update of houses of multiple occupancy. It's been agreed that a note will be provided, which should have been sent in email. I received mine in email. Did people get theirs on email as well? No. No?
Yeah, they should have done it. Went to all members.
Yeah, I got it. Monday? Friday?
Yeah, Monday.
No, it was Friday. It was before the weekend, I think.
Yeah, last week.
We'll have to check that one. But so we've got the briefing note, and I appreciate if we've just got it in front of you. It's going to be very hard to make the suitable comments we should do.
We could take questions away if need be.
We can always have questions after the meeting, I'd imagine. But I think in terms of those that have read it, if they I don't think it needs necessarily a a conversation from yourself, unless you wanted to present something really quickly, because I'm just cautious on time. I'll just be more conscious if people do have questions, if they can just put their questions straight. Are you happy to do that rather than... So does any member wish to speak on this item?
I'd like an update on where we are with the unlicensed HMOs, which is what I asked earlier in the evening. Thank you.
Sure.
I thought we was going to have that report tonight, actually, on the 600 that we haven't got. So,
if I may, Chair, so the note was sent on the 28th of February. I just sent it, and the unlicensed. So it's the same report. We just didn't make it in time to turn it into report, but it's the same information that would have gone into report. So what is missing is essentially the implications from the various service areas, but you'd have the same information. And obviously, we can, mindful of time, we can take questions now or question later. And I guess the unlicensed one started paragraph 9. So I'll hand over to Dalal.
Okay, so in terms of the unlicensed HMO, so I think at the last housing fees report, I did make reference to the higher number of unlicensed HMOs. We've significantly reduced that down to 212.
So we've got loads of money then.
So in terms of, I mean, it's a more complex process because obviously we have to validate whether it's a licensable HMO or not, and that requires like physical checks, but also like desktop checks that we have to carry out because we're a very small team and we need to make the best use of the tools and resources that we have.
Sorry, Dilla. I think we all pretty much had the same question with that one. My concern would be, when did we have that meeting? Was that November? Something? Yeah. So in November, the meeting, it was 600. And I know you've just said you've got a small team there, and you've done 400 checks in the last 3 months, 4 months. Is that correct?
We've managed to reduce that list down from 600 to 212.
How did you reduce that list down? Sorry, because I know obviously the technicalities of it, but 400 in 3-4 months must be quite a feat. I know, you know, is there a sort of thing on how many of them are now licensed and how many are prosecuted and how many weren't? Because I know when we've spoken previously, you said about the some have been proven not to be HMOs. Right. But my concern with that, and I don't know if the committee shares that, is just it seems an odd number, 400 in 3 months with a small team. Yeah, can you confirm what that process was, please?
So a lot of that is about validation. So a lot of our unlicensed HMOs come from electoral roll records. So that's when you have different names at a property. So obviously we license the large HMOs, which is the 5 bedrooms, and we also up to 5 people, and then we do small HMOs, which was 3 to 4 people. So when we cross-reference the records from electoral records, council tax records, we do an Experian check. You quickly can identify whether it's a family or whether these are not family members, whether there's been a high turnover of occupants that are lived at that address. So that significantly helps us to reduce the number of potential properties which are licensable or those which are not licensable.
Sorry, so Councillor Hebb.
Yeah, I've just got a number of questions and I'll quickly rattle them off. The question that's already been asked, I have to ask, do we really know what the reality is? I don't think we possibly do. There's a note in the briefing note around that senior management are delaying the recruitment. I suppose my question is, they're only going to do that if they don't see the cost opportunity benefit of having that role. So it'd be helpful to know what that's all about, because ultimately, like we said last time on our sort of cigarette packet maths, you know, looking at some of the numbers that you used, and you know, we worked out that it would pay for itself, but most importantly, create better outcomes. So I'm surprised that we haven't spoken a little bit more about that, or if that's the delay, perhaps because it is an economic. It'd be helpful to know. There's a map in here, and the link didn't work. I don't know if that was just me, but I couldn't get the link to work. No. If someone could send that out, please, that would be great. And I should have raised that before the meeting. That's a silly thing to have done. Lastly, I get why you're focusing in certain areas, but I think categorically it's not necessarily accurate, because there are areas in the east of the borough that I know and have witnessed in recent weeks that have to be a HMO. And I don't think this issue is contained. It would naturally be, because there's a dense population west of the borough. Not going to discredit that. But I do think there's probably more in the east of the borough than, well, certainly what this report is stating.
Okay, so in terms of in terms of finance, the scheme has generated around £600,000 over the last 4 years, and if you break that down, that's 262,000 in licence fees and 337 in civil penalty notices, and that's for a range of offences from failure to licence to management regulation breaches. So in terms of whether it's good value for the council, licensing in terms of improving housing standards has generally been positive. We've also, from the table within the report, in terms of enforcement activities, we've used the vast range of powers that are available to the council to improve housing standards. So I would say that, yes, the scheme has worked in terms of improving licence and housing standards, but it's also, we've seen an increase in enforcement action because of the poor housing conditions in the HMO sector. And we have to bear in mind, the HMO sector only makes up, I think it's 1.3% of the private rented sector. 98% of the private rented sector is single dwelling lets. So in terms of our role, we do two functions. One, for the HMOs, but we also spend a considerable amount of our other time on the private rented sector.
Okay, so Councillor Redfield first.
Yeah, it still doesn't sit well with me, Dalal. I mean, you guesstimated 600 before HMOs that were not licensed, and now it's gone down to 200 and something. I think if you spoke to most councillors, they'll tell you where they are. You know, and I mean, when we worked it out as 800,000. Even if you employed someone else to do a part of the job, you'd still bring 700,000 back into the council's coffers. So I think we've got streets that are being used now. You know, because that all has to come through. Most of it has to come through planning. If HMOs are brought into the area, most of it. I mean, I only found out the first HMO I got through my residents getting in touch with me. So I think it's still an area we need to look at big time, because I just don't. It doesn't sit well with me at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Lydiard.
Yeah, thanks for your report. I've reported a couple of HMOs, and I've had planning officers come round to do the inspections, and they've not really got a result. But I know that they are HMOs because they're two doors up from me, basically, you know. I'm wondering how the planning service and your own service works together or differently, and is there an opportunity for you to get together and I'm sure, you know, you guys could work out what's an HMO in planning terms and vice versa. I don't know what you think on that.
Okay, so in terms of the scheme and the coverage of the scheme, this scheme does come to an end in June 2024, which is next year, and we are exploring extending the scheme and increasing the coverage of the scheme, so it covers areas where we know that HMOs that are currently under the additional license schemes are not covered. In terms of the list of HMOs, it's very easy to pull together a list of suspected HMOs, but the work that is the complex piece of work that needs to be done is the validation of that list. That's where the intelligence gathering, and that's when the intelligence of analysing that list to make sure that it's valid in terms of going out and spending officers' time to go out and investigate those HMOs. In terms of the investigation process, we investigate to criminal standard. So there's a lot of like photographs, witness statements that we have to gather, breaches of management regulations. So it isn't just a question of that you go there and you just detect these 5 or 6 people or 7 people. There's a whole raft of evidence gathering that we officers have to carry out and then produce an evidence file to produce. And then in terms of...
Oh, sorry, I thought you was finished. Sorry.
Sure.
I mean, the landlords that I know, I'm not terribly impressed with, to be perfectly honest. I'm sure there's some really good ones, but a lot of really interested in the money. Wouldn't want to pay £1,000 on HMO licensing, and probably would offer a bribe. Does that happen?
So the short answer is no. Officers are not offered bribes not to license properties. In terms of planning, because I think you asked a question regarding planning, we do work closely with planning colleagues. In terms of
I'm sorry, Delal, we've literally hit time, which we agreed, and I hate to cut you off. Personally, and I think with the committee's approval, this should come back as an actual full item, because there's a lot more questions on there.
Yes.
I know we've spent 15 minutes on it, but yeah, I think a more fuller, detailed report, future plans, whatever that side of things. I know it's up to the next committee / whatever that may look like after May, but I think by what we're seeing tonight, it can't just be left and drop off. So yes, thank you for that, and I do think, although I know you explained that the briefing note was because of the time to produce a report, I just think an actual report with recommendations and stuff like that is needed for this committee, I think, to feel comfortable with it. Yeah, because so with that, there's no recommendations, but we have now the work programme, and obviously I've just if we're agreed to do that, which we just did, to put that on the work programme moving forward. I think this is there anything else people want to see on the work programme moving forward, or just?
Well, there is no work programme for the year, is there?
No. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we want the housing development on as soon as possible.
Yeah, and housing.
CO1, I think Joy asked for CO1 and
Yeah.
be on it as a report.
So CO1 and housing development. So, thank you for that. As this is the last meeting of the municipal year, I'd like to thank all members and officers for their hard work and contribution and participation throughout the year, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think it's a really good committee, really challenging, but I think we all do it with the best of intentions for our residents, which is what ultimately we all do this for. So thank you very much. And that
Cheers,
that
all.
concludes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, officers.
Got something to say,
I wanted to add an item, but nobody was looking. We wanted to bring an item on just the repairs performance. We've got a willing contractor who wanted to come and speak to you. Obviously, Mayors in that case. Councillor, that's right, Councillor Spillman is really keen for them to come as a separate item. So just, if we can, add it to the next municipal year. Thank you.
Agreed. Brilliant. Thank you.
Yes.
Whomever that shall be. So